Or keep you waiting.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Right, it's called the meeting to order at 6:46. We have no announcements tonight. Hello? Let's see, public comment. Anybody here with public comment? Hearing none, I think we would like to take item A, out of order. This is the request for authorization of a new contract for Tahoe ambulance. We have representatives here, right?
Yes.
So do you want to make a presentation? Not a presentation, but do you want to open the discussion or?
Yes, I want to.
I think that's fine there. Is that? or-
Yeah, they say Owl will pick you up. Yeah, you get welcome up there, but
This is the hour right here.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm Dennis Cataldo, the president of Cataldo Ambulance Service. And with me is Rob White, who is our division manager for this region and a good portion of the company. So we've obviously been in West Newbury now for about 12 or 13 years. Enjoyed a very healthy relationship with the other emergency agencies in the community. We work closely with Chief Wire, who expressed, some interest in maybe modifying the current agreement to maybe benefit the community a little bit more. And aside from that, answer any questions that you might have or provide any information that you need.
Great. Either of you have any questions?
Yeah, the only issue I had we looked at this at our previous meeting at the contract, and the one minor concern that I had was the range of your contract delivery to hospitals. And whereas Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a cardiac and a traumatic injury one. My comment was, I thought that should be included as the radius distance.
Yeah, so we currently do that now just to provide some feedback with that. So we have what we call in our protocols as a point of entry. So if you have a trauma patient or you have a STEMI patient, which is an MI patient, you can't bring them to any place other than Portsmouth Hospital. So your trauma patients, if they meet the criteria, have to go to Portsmouth. Your STEMI patients have to go to Portsmouth, or they have to be put in a helicopter and flown to that type of place. So
Well,
we can definitely.
it's actually the term, was it STEMI or STEMI?
STEMI,
STEMI.
it's an ST elevation MI.
Okay,
They're called STEMIs.
Okay.
That's just
Okay.
a quick thing that somebody's
Okay.
having a big printer.
okay.
So we have to bring them to Portsmouth. So that's already in there. We definitely bring patients to Portsmouth. As Chief will tell you, if they're a trauma patient, we don't have Medflight. So we'll definitely go to Portsmouth. We go there probably quite a bit with those sick patients.
I just thought that ought to be clarified in the contract, I know you already do it.
Yeah, so we can definitely change that in which.
Keeps leaving his.
State regulation supersedes kind of our decision process when it comes to point entry plans for particular condition, whether it was traumatic or cardiac or something. So, the level of qualification of the emergency room in the facilities is registered with the state, and the state point of entry plan really dictates what we have for options, whether it be children or burn victims or cardiac or anything of that nature.
So for a burn victim, you might take them somewhere else?
That could depend on the level of acuity of the patient, so they might be flown to a place that has a burn center. Or it's a level 1 trauma center.
Okay.
Yeah, if we had a significant burn patient in West Newbury, we'd probably call for a helicopter.
And did you have?
Yeah, so at the time, a few, earlier this spring, I forget if it was a couple of meetings ago, I brought the existing contract before the board, just to let you know it was coming up for renewal at the end of the fiscal year. Had some conversations with the chief. He's been working for some time with the Salisbury chief on a potential new contract that I think would have some benefits to the town, and we've had some discussions with Cataldo. But that's not something that is before you tonight, because we just got it last week and there really wasn't time to process it and get it to you. So when we talked about it earlier this spring, I think we were thinking in terms of extending the current contract. There were some housekeeping items, including the one Chris mentioned, as well as I think the frequency of reporting and whether that's what we want or need, or whether that might be more than what we need. So my recommendation for tonight would be to extend the current contract, just so it doesn't lapse at the end of June. perhaps 3 months, and that allows time to look at the new contract and make sure that before that's put before, both the board and Cataldo for endorsement, that everyone has time to really fully vet that, so, that would be my recommendation.
Does that work for you? You were shaking your head.
Yeah, that works for us, yeah, I mean, we're not pen and paper guys, we're more about like, we're gonna be there, like, we've got some communities that, you know, they can't figure out how to get documents in place, and like, you still gonna, oh yeah, we're in place, yeah, we're not leaving the community, we're not gonna do, you know, we're gonna do the right thing for West Newbury, I promise you,
Okay,
yeah.
Want to make a motion?
sure.
Make a motion to extend the current contract with Cataldo Ambulance for 3 months. In the interim with the chief, looking through the contract presented and selected.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just a discussion, what I could do after tonight, is forward around the draft that the chief sent to me. I didn't include it in the packet because I didn't want it with all the other, they have probably, I don't know, 600 pages in tonight's packet, something crazy, so I didn't want to hit them with a brand new contract on 2 days' notice, so I will send it around to you guys tomorrow morning, so you have it, and that way we can work with the chief to make sure that all makes sense over the course of the next few meetings.
Okay, sounds good.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, Steve Floyd, Way to the River.
Yeah.
And this is just, one question is to understand, is Capello the only ambulance service and everything else is subcontracted out, or are they one of several, and there's some kind of a process to?
Sure, so we have a combination, so they are, the ambulance service that we contract out to West Newbury. But we also have several fire departments that are in our area that have their own ambulances, Georgetown, Newbury, environmental.
And I don't know that this is Cataldo specifically, but I would ask, I know that there's been complaints that have been filed, and I would ask, and they may not be against Cataldo, so, well, I don't want to be one record saying it was against Cataldo, but I know what I filed one myself. For when, there was an issue with picking my wife up. And I would just ask that all of any complaints are addressed specifically. And then where they're found, if there are any complaints about one with the police department. At that time, you may not need to tell them, but any complaints that have been registered, I would ask that they be documented. Now, further, my comment is that one thing I would like to see in the contract is coordination with 911. My specific issue, I called 911. The only place my wife could go is Mass General. She sends that. But this was last year. The only place they could treat her was Mass General. And I called 911. I said, my wife needs an ambulance to Mass General. And she said, do you want me to stay on the line? I said, no, as long as you're only going to take her to Mass General, I'm good. And then they came, and the particular ambulance did not have to tell her not. But particular ambulance would refuse to take her to Mass General. I put her on the phone to take her. So that we want to make sure that we're coordinated with 911. So they're educated to say, sorry, sir, we can't guarantee that. That would have helped me out at the time. Or that they're in sync with the ambulance service, so that they know if the person who's calling was a specific hospital, whether they can do that or not.
Thank you. So Mike, will you follow up on
We'll
that?
follow up, I'll give you my contact information.
All right, great. All in favor of extending the contract? Aye. All right, thank you both. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you. See you in 90 days.
Okay.
A good summer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have board, commission, committee items, and I think I'd like to take that in order, if that's all right with you, so we can get staff out of here. So, we'll move on to agenda item D. Brian, are you here for?
Our committee.
And I was wrong.
Okay. All right, so that's good then. So, those are the reappointments. All right, let's start with, the FY25 land valuation presentation. Chief Assessor.
Hello, I'm Christian Quinn. I'm the chief assessor here in West Newbury. I'd like to present to the board a little bit about the assessment certification, how the process is going this year. Specifically the land valuation side of the process. So next slide, Angus. Going going over just a little bit outline here, talk about what we're actually doing in the certification year, where we are currently with the methodology and where we're going, the results following the change in methodology and next steps after that. See, in specifically chapter law, chapter 40, every 5th year, the town needs to undertake a certification from the DOR. And this is basically our 5-year audit. We need to show all that we're doing as far as data management, evaluation, methodology, performance analysis, administration, and appeals, and the Department of Revenue and specifically the Bureau of Local Assessment. They come in and for a week, they look over everything and either give us a preliminary certification or to say, no, they still need some things to work on. And it's a full year process leading up to it. I'm in weekly contact with our field rep about going over different reports that they need, the data quality, we've already gone over that with DOR. All the data quality and cost and construction tables, land schedules, those are all reviewed as well. So everything from the beginning of the assessment process to the final step in the assessment process, appeals, and everything in between is all reviewed. And this is an effort by the commission, and I can't remember when this came into play, but this is an effort by the commissioner to make sure that all towns across the Commonwealth are being assessed fairly and equitably. So like that. So prior to, well, I guess FY24, this is what we're still using. We have mainly what was driving the land values were these neighborhood codes. Each color up there represents a different neighborhood code. There are 19 overall. And that'll give you a basic price per square foot to use in that neighborhood. To account for the principle of diminishing returns, you run that price per square foot through a size curve. The larger a property gets, the smaller the price per square foot it's going to be, just because of that economic principle there. Where even though you might have a smaller property and it costs less, the price per square foot is going to be more. And that's all based in market study as well. From there, that price per square foot and adjusted for size is run through over 18 or 18 site adjustments. That can be, that includes access, road condition, conservation restrictions, easements, use, location, shape, topo, view, wet size, and F1. So there's quite a lot there. After that, if it's in chapter land, the value of the property is overridden based on the state recommendations for that agricultural use. And then another piece of the equation is excess land, which in FY24 and previously was valued at $8,000 per acre, and then adjusted by site adjustments as well. And that's just flat across the town. The issues with the current methodology is that that's a lot of neighborhood codes and site adjustments just for the size of our town, where we don't have a lot of different districts in town. There is a lot of differences between the different parts of town, but it's overall residential, and somewhere between suburban, farm, and agricultural. Depending on where in town you are, it's all the same character throughout town. There isn't a central business district, which is wildly different from a different town. part of town. Also, the number of neighborhood codes that we have, is hard to calibrate considering the number of land sales that we have, where I have to base some of the neighborhood code adjustments on comparable sales in other parts of town and adjusting that to where I believe that neighborhood is in comparison to the comparable sale. So, and the final thing is that the contrasting neighborhood codes, which I know had been an issue for the assessing department in the past, where you might have two adjoining properties, but they're in separate neighborhood codes. That can lead to very a huge jump in valuation between the two. And I've tried to sort out a lot of those, trying to figure out what neighborhood code that they best fit into. And if there's any that crossover between two codes where you could go both ways and try to sort that out. But there is still an issue where it doesn't feather well between two neighborhoods, and where instead of just having kind of a blended approach between two properties that might one might be on Crane Street and the other might be on Robin, instead of and having more of a blended approach between the two properties, and they have just it's black and white between the two, and so I don't see it as equitable as we can get.
Christian, how did those neighborhood codes originally, how were they originally?
How do they come into existence? That would be, I'm not sure exactly when, but I would say that Patriot put all the neighborhood codes, who they were our farmer contractors who did the majority of assessing services. And they came up with codes based on their own market research of the
So
town.
you just inherited that system?
Yeah.
I have a related question, and I know, so. Do the boundaries, have they changed over the years, or are they held constant from one?
I would say about 98% of the time I haven't changed a neighborhood code. It's in the 3.5 years I've been here, it's very rare that I changed one of those codes, just because it does change the value drastically.
And if I heard you correctly, it's the land value, not the, or does the neighborhood code run through to the building value as well?
No, it doesn't affect the building value.
It's just the land value.
Yeah.
I'll take questions at the end.
So in an effort to overcome those issues that I was seeing, with the town, I utilized a lot of technology, GIS and, some, regression-based mathematics to develop a method that is more blended between different areas and takes into a market approach based on current data. This is a map that shows the desirability of different parts of town as far as where the darker green is, you can see it runs along Main Street. That's gonna be the lower valued desirable part of town, and then it goes from green to yellow to orange to the red, and then finally to white along the river, and that'll be the most expensive or most desirable properties in town and have a higher valuation on them. This, let me just make sure I can know that's in here. So this model was developed between me and the folks at MVPC. They originally drew up a 3-dimensional map that showed not only just the X and Y axis on the face of the earth, but also a third dimension going up in the air, Z direction, and not being color coordinated, but being anything that was taller on that third axis, the Z axis, was going to be of a greater value, and it helped me work through a lot of extrapolating the data I had across all the different properties in town. So from that third dimension, map, third dimension via Z, access, so I ended up calling these a Z scores, so if you hear me reference that, that's where that came from. So, can you go back actually a little bit? So this gets rid of the neighborhood code entirely and bases majority of the valuation on the Z score. This Z score is then multiplied by a determined typical land sale price, and then given a side adjustment if applicable. You can also see in these that, in this that between the different areas, it shades a little bit better. Where two areas that have a strong opposing force won't blend as much. If you look at possibly on Main Street and Barberry, those two areas don't blend together as much just because they are very different characteristically. While you might see, where's a good example? Further along Middle Street going towards the Artichoke River, it kind of goes across Garden where there's a lot more green, but then it blends in and goes more towards orange as you go further towards the reservoir. This universal model, as opposed to a segmented neighborhood code model, is a lot easier to calibrate for me. I'm able to use land sale data from across town and apply that on a universal approach, since I only have to really update one field and then it's applied across all the town and across all the Z scores across and that I have for properties. At the next slide. So how did I develop these Z scores? Where they come from? It was not just my best guess. This was done originally using 10 years worth of land prices. I extracted land prices from improved sales using an assessing method, and then I normalized all those scores across every year against what the typical land value was that year. And so I was able to look at individual years and see how each land sale was performing against a typical land price that year. I took all that data and then standardized it against 100% scale. And that gave me the basis that I started out at. Anything above 100 is more desirable. Average is at 100, below average is less than 100. And I was able to map that using GIS and with MVPC's help. And from there, I was able to create a fabric very similar to what you're seeing now up there, using a mathematical equation called regression, and specifically inverse distance weighted regression interpolation, where basically that says it looks at the Z-scores of properties close to it, and the closer you get to that Z-score, that known Z-score, the more likely it is to be applied to that property. So you might have a Z-score that's in an adjoining property, we know that one, and so an adjoining property will likely have the same Z-score, but one that might be a quarter mile away, not as weighted on that property. So going from that initial framework, I used my own appraisal methods, my general knowledge of the town, and working with an AI algorithm I was able to work through every single parcel in town and give every single parcel a Z-score. And going through every single parcel, I really had to go in on everyone and manually enter them and doing that took into consideration physical characteristics, distance from value drivers, like Main Street is a negative value driver for properties, or the river would be a positive value driver. Being closer to the Cherry Hill Reservoir is a value driver. I-95, you can see is lower value. And then with those physical characteristics in mind, as well as no knowledge of known Z-scores, I was able to figure out the whole map for the town. Back to the next slide. So knowing the Z-score is only half of what I need to know before that whole equation gets produced for land value. I also need to know what the base value is for the year. Typically, I'm looking at certain neighborhoods in town and how those are performing. And you can see that those are more of the yellowish color on the map. Those are going to be more typical, and I'm looking at every sale throughout the year, and I'm extracting land data from all those sales, as well as looking at the average typical properties in town to get that land base land value, multiplying that through all the Z-scores, and then come up with land values. Additionally, on top of the primary acre land valuation, which is what I've been talking about so far, is Bureau of Land Assessment has given a directive to all communities in certification this year that we have to update how we value excess acreage. Previously, as I mentioned, that all excess acreage, that's acres above above the first acre, was valued at $8,000 per acre, regardless of where in town it was, though that can be adjusted based on site adjustments. And honestly, this was something that was annoying me for a while, so I'm fairly happy to update this because I didn't see that as very, very equitable to people in town, where the excess acreage should be adjusted for location where it is as well, and just not given straight $8,000 valuation across the board. So looking at the sales of larger properties in town, I found that what's happening in reality was that the first 4 acres were actually valued in their sales at about $6,400 per acre. And after those first 4 sales, the price per acre went down to about $3,300 per acre, and that's just on the standard price. It can be adjusted up or down based on the Z-score. So, and some of the more desirable parts of town, that those first 4 acres might be $12,000 per acre or $18,000 per acre. And so I have to keep that in mind when looking at the finished product here. That's all for that slide. And the next one. I also got rid of a bunch of the site adjustments, just to have them more concise and easier to apply assessment, where I feel previously site adjustments were just given out and not in a very equitable way. There are now only limited options to access. That those are parcels that might not have frontage on the road, easements, on properties, access frontage, and that means, access frontage on the river. One or two properties with that. High voltage transmission lines running, across your property. The shape of the property, topography, if the property is unbuildable, property has a view, and if the property has significant, wetlands. All adjustments, I should know, need to be, will be reviewed by the state during the certification process. And if the state sees that these are not being applied fairly and equitably, I have to go back and adjust them or take them out of the assessment equation. Good, next slide. So after everything was said and done, I went back and looked at the sales of the vacant land sales from 2023. There were only 3 of them, so this isn't a huge sample size, but it does come in at 102% assessment to sale ratio. That means I was 2% over typically on what their sale price was compared to what the assessment was. Overall, as a town, after applying this methodology to all land values in town, the median increase was only $300. But that's just the median. About 68% of the town will see a change in land value between $43,500 and $43,800. The typical land value in town is now about $383,350. And if you've looked online at any recent land sales, you'll see that seems about right.
Is that on a per acre or for their entire lot?
That's for the entire lot.
Okay.
Next slide there. So that was the first major step in my development of the revaluation. Since then, I've done the changes in value to outbuildings, commercial properties, condos, economic properties, and mixed-use properties. I'm about to start on the residential property buildings. That'll take me a while to get through because that's the bulk of the town value. Personal property and utilities will also be done coming up in July. We have a contractor who will go around to all the businesses in town and do a listing of all the in place personal property so that we have a true list of what's out there. And figure out what our tax base is for that category. A lot of these changes are, and I should add that there are changes in outbuildings and condos, almost everything. And that's due to, I feel that even though we have a small town and small department, there's a lot of different methodologies out there that can go outside of what's been done previously, where a lot of the older method had been in place for the last 20-30 years. And even though we have new technology, we have new methods that are being used in other communities outside of Massachusetts. I would say a majority of Massachusetts will still go by that whole methodology. So this is not something that you'll typically see done. But after thinking about this, learning about this, and working through a lot of the issues so far in the process, I think this is going to end up having a much more equitable and easier to manage assessment system. So I'm working through residential properties and hopefully get those values done sometime in August, which will lead into October 1st, and when the state will come in and do their audit with me. I'll have all my reports ready at that point, and hopefully we'll obtain our preliminary certification around that time. Following that, the law is that we have to have at least 5 business days worth of, a public input period. I am on the side of giving more than just those 5 business days. Really, especially with this amount of change going into the assessment system, I want as many people in the know about what's going on. That's part of why I'm giving this presentation. But just, I would really like property owners to be knowledgeable about their assessments. So I am going to be sending out impact notices following the preliminary certification, giving a period of time for them to come in and have a meeting with me if they're not happy or if they have questions concerning their values. And that's that informal appeal opportunity. That's gonna be sometime in October, not exactly sure when. The only time constraint of going longer than 5 days is that all this needs to be ready to go for classification hearing, so we can set tax rate, we can set up tax bills. Following the informal appeal period, then the state will have final certification based on any changes that come out of the appeal period. And that's all I had. Open any questions if you have any. No, it's a lot of work.
Questions from the board, and then I'll accept a few questions from the. You want to start, Chris, is there?
I'll start, I guess. A lot of questions. And to distill it down, I think most of what you were talking about had to do with the valuation of the land, not the structures. That's coming, and there'll be an adjustment on those.
Definitely.
Okay. Just a real quick question. You talked about the value drivers.
Mhm.
Who determines what those are and what's good and what's bad? And the reason I asked is I found it, I'll say ironic, but the riverfront properties are considered more desirable. Yet with climate change and flooding, I would not want to personally own one of those properties.
You might say that, but
So that's a negative. So I don't know who, how these,
the market tells me. I have to go by what the sale prices are at this point.
And the market hasn't responded to that yet.
Right, until I'm told otherwise, I have to to value at full market value. Which is a sales price.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to fully grasp, and I think it was some impressive work, but I'm trying to fully understand, and it almost sounds like what you did is you created a surface, a 3-dimensional surface. And then you assign a Z-score based on where it sat on that surface for each property.
Yes,
Okay,
that's boiling it down, yes.
yeah, okay, all right, that's interesting to me, it's,
There was an interpolation between
yeah,
the
yeah,
Z-score and where it stood on that 3D surface.
yeah.
another question, you mentioned, you said all adjustments are gonna be reviewed by the state.
Mhm.
You know, the hot topic button has been equestrian properties.
Yes,
Does that component get reviewed by the state as
that will
well?
be reviewed by the state.
So then, at that point, it's actually. My concern as a select person is if, whereas we're the only town or city in the state accounting for that, if that leaves the town any liability. So if the state then validates it,
I would feel that we would be on firm ground to say that it's being applied fairly and equitably if the state okays it, but that's also if the market, if we get sales in suggesting otherwise, I'll be adjusting it right away. But I haven't seen any sales that have been contrary to that adjustment.
I mean, I think the problem with that, and I was thinking about this earlier today, is in essence, it should be incorporated into the value of the property itself, but it's an add-on. It's sort of as a flashpoint for people at that point. So,
Right.
Any other questions on this, methodology?
Yeah.
So, you said not many other towns, are there any other towns using this approach?
Not that I know of, a lot of it, came from looking at assessing districts outside of New England that have a lot more data to work with. And what I have tried to do is take what these, there are assessing districts throughout the United States that are kind of like the gold standard, what you want to live up to be. And so I look at what they're doing and trying to say to myself, well, how can I do that here with the limited amount of staff and funding and data available? And so I educated myself and I used more technology than I think what is typically used in order to get to that goal. And while it's different and it will lead to some adjustments in people's assessments, I think it's going to be a fair assessment in the end.
So the different shading, the different color shading that obviously corresponds to different Z scores, so that's gonna apply like proportionally to the amount of land within, so within, you know, square lot that's shaded with different, that's gonna, like the GIS is gonna do that analysis on a proportional basis based on.
So there is still a land curve applied through this, and I adjusted the land curve as well, because, you know, why not if I'm in there meddling around with every other part of the equation? And that's based on a reverse or no, inverse natural logarithmic function, and I applied that to the Z scores and looked at the accompanying sales from that, and found that actually there were a lot of smaller size properties that were being overvalued. So those will see a decrease in value based on compared to everybody else. But for the most part, that land curve didn't change too much.
So given that this is not applied in New England, are you anticipating any challenges getting this certified?
I think it's
Seeing it.
I think it's gonna be a little bit of a shock to DOR, to be honest. And it's a little bit tricky because we also are between field reps where one is retiring, and so I'm having somebody come in just for the certification, and then next year I'll get my permanent replacement for field rep. But I've been working with them weekly, and they're aware of it's a different approach. Yeah.
Are they aware in some detail or just, you know, superficially aware?
Not in detail, not yet. I mean, they have many other communities to take care of, especially with the extra caseload of taking on the communities for the retiring representative.
Yeah.
Any other questions here? Catherine, did you have a question?
I had a couple, stop me if I go too long. You mentioned that you're going to have a new methodology for valuing outbuildings. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Sure, so outbuildings those values haven't been changed too much since the time I've been here. I'm not sure what Patriot's process was in updating those outbuilding values. They were put in through what's called a cost approach. How much would it cost to build this, essentially? And subtracting out any depreciation. I'm doing the same, but I'm updating values to what they currently are based on what they are in a published manual called Marshall and Swift. It's nationally published. Many appraisers use it for doing their single fee appraisals. So there will be increases in outbuildings as well. That being said, that does go into when you look at overall sale of a property. You have these small differences, but they still have to arrive at that sale price. So even though the land price might be increasing, or land value and outbuilding value might be increasing, the end of the day goal is that sale price. So it isn't that everybody overall is just gonna go up over, you know, where we were previously at a typical our property value. We're looking hopefully to stay fairly close to what median property values are currently.
My next question was, is that you said there were 19 neighborhood codes, some of which were developed by the Patriot system. Out of those 19, which ones how many are yours?
I didn't develop any of the neighborhood codes. Those are all from Patriot.
I thought earlier on you said some of the neighborhood codes had to do with riverfront or equestrian.
Neighborhood codes, well, there was river frontage neighborhood code. Equestrian is this side adjustment, which makes a single property different from those around it. As whereas a neighborhood is more of a large grouping of parcels. That similar physical and characteristics to it.
So none of the neighborhood codes are ones that you developed, is what I'm hearing you say?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell me what is your definition of overall median ASR?
ASR is an assessment to sale ratio. That is, if you take the current assessment and divide that by the sale price of a property, you get a ratio out there, and the goal of that is supposed to be 100%. That would indicate that you are valuing right at market level. Overall median would mean the whole town and looking at every single assessment to sale ratio and finding the median of all those.
Thank you for explaining that to me. And my last question is how did you arrive at the definition of what an equestrian property is?
That was finding. Knowing that there was an issue with a certain subset of properties and needing to address it, I needed to put boundaries on what that meant, so that I could apply any adjustments as equitably as I can. And going through the properties that sold, I tried to find as similar characteristics as possible between those that sold and having assessment to sale ratio issues compared with the rest of the town, where they were being assessed lower compared with the overall median. And so I had to discover those characteristics at that point, and not having a granular ability to mark down every aspect of every property in town, I had to be general in a sense. And so it was mostly an area for riding flat enough for horses to graze or for people to ride horses on that land. There needed to be a barn and there needed to be fencing.
Catherine, I'm just gonna.
That's fine.
Steve, did you have a question?
I did. I think there was a mention that this was essentially a land-based or location-based assessment change. And does that mean that there's also going to be a structure-based one coming up, and how do those dovetail?
So there is gonna be a change in how we value the structures as well, where currently. We currently use what's called a sales adjusted cost approach to value buildings. And the idea right now is to go to a strictly just sales-based cost approach, or just sales-based.
Yeah, so that's the how. I'm interested in the implementation. So is there gonna be one implementation that is location based, and then a following implementation that says, okay, your taxes change once based on your location, And then they're gonna change again based on,
I'm hoping to get it all done this year. That's the idea, because at that point, I can have the state, okay it, and then this new methodology is all in place and okayed by the state. And, go forward from there.
And
I,
that would be good for 5 years.
And that'll be good for 5 years. I don't really intend on doing this again.
Yeah, sure.
I do have a concern that it looks, and maybe I didn't do the numbers correctly, but the median house price was $380,000. And the 70% of the changes were gonna be approximately up to 12%. $43,000 or something like that, plus or minus. That means that, I guess, 30+% would be outside of that range, but even a bigger change. These are these are pretty big changes to people's property values, and I think the communication. Getting a note in the mail, might be shocking to some people if they're gonna find out that that especially for that 1/3 of your value of your property changed 20%.
Right, so I am, this is the second meeting I've had with the select board, publicizing the reevaluation process. There will be, and I think I've had the reevaluation on the agenda for the board of assessors every month for the past 6 months. There'll be the notice in the mail. There'll be notices on our website as well, on the town's website. And the formal appeal period that people can go into where there'll be enough time for people to get in during normal business hours and after business hours, so that I can meet with everybody that would like to meet with me.
Yeah, I understand that. I think the concern would be, does the average person should know that this is ongoing? I don't know the best way to communicate that, but I know that you're using some methods, but I don't know that the average person in West Newbury knows that they're potentially going to get this kind of a significant change.
That was something the board of assessors could discuss. Your presentation here is to the select board, just about what you're working on, but perhaps that's something the board of assessors could follow up on,
Okay.
Any
Yeah, Steve, can I just, Steve, I think it's important to recognize too that there's not a direct correlation between. If say somebody's assessed value goes up 10% or goes down 10%. Doesn't mean that their tax is going to go up or down 10% necessarily, because everything is changing, and ultimately your tax is a function of how much money the town has budgeted, how much, what was approved for a budget at town meeting, and the values of all the properties, the aggregate values of all the properties in town, so the amount that we budgeted at town meeting is a fixed number because we've done that. So as property values change, if your property value assessment goes up 10% or 5% or down 5%, it doesn't mean that your tax assessment is going to exactly track that. Because everything's changing at the same, all values can potentially be changing at the same time. So the aggregate total could go up or could go down. So, I guess I want to make sure that people don't oversimplify, the relationship between change in assessed value and what your tax bill is gonna be.
And I think sounds like that's all part of the communication.
Right,
that you need to
right.
understand.
Yeah.
Right, this is a big change.
Any
Yeah.
questions online? I don't see any raised hands. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Scott Boltbay, Browns Lane. So you mentioned that you're using some AI models for that. Do you know which LLM you were using behind that? And is that certified for this type of an assessment?
I can't answer that right now.
And you were also, you were asked about what constitutes an equestrian property, and you had came up with a couple of arbitrary type of things. So how do you know it's correlation versus causation when the majority of these homes in this town, very desirable town, majority of these homes, regardless of what characteristics they have, are selling from above the assessed value? It could be anything. It could be the color of the house. It could be whether they have a septic system or a town water. It could be, there's a million objective parameters that you could run back through your AI model that would give you, it would tell you if the land is flat, if that is a correlation or causation to increase the rate.
It was through a process of looking at sales over 11 or 12 years and seeing that these properties that I had identified as being equestrian based properties were selling at a lower assessment to sale ratio than the rest of the town. When adjusted when using this factor, they came into more in line with the rest of the town. So going in after the fact and looking at it and looking at if I had changed this in the moment, would these sales come out with a better assessment sale ratio? And seeing that when I did put that in, it was better assessment, more fair and equitable. That's when I decided that it was a good idea to present this to the Board of Assessors.
So this
Okay.
data,
Excuse me, I don't want to get too far. I know the equestrian properties are an issue, but the point of tonight's presentation was more about the new methodology for the.
right, but the new methodology, even at the very beginning of this presentation,
Mhm.
the new methodology hinges upon desirability.
Yeah.
There's no mathematical formula for desirability.
Yeah.
So if the new model is based on a subjective, that means the old models have been too. And I think this town needs to have this data that makes up this, needs to be publicly available. The model needs to be audited and certified for its correlation versus causation. And I think that we need to make sure that there's no arbitrary assignment of increases just on some limited data that's available. So the new model already, by definition, is not based on math, it's based on a subjective requirement.
I think that probably following up with the Board of Assessors is the best bet. I mean, the select board really has no role in this whole process. So this is the courtesy that Christian is presenting this to us, so,
But the select board hires,
no. The town manager hires the assessor. Yeah. So thank you for your comments. So, and I would suggest following up with the Board of Assessors. I think that's the most appropriate thing. Any final thoughts from the board?
No.
Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Let's see. We go to the open space committee questionnaire. Graham, you still there?
Sure am.
All right. Do you know what page that is?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. All right, any questions from the board on this?
Yeah.
All right,
Under priorities for next year, it says, continued land acquisition. I just want to make a comment. I remember back like something years ago after the master plan was done, it wasn't just a process to acquire land, it was an aggressive effort to, get donations and restrictions on lands. So I don't want this committee to think that we have to acquire all properties to put protections on. I would hope they would be looking at other methods to put protections on at lower costs.
did you hear that, Graham?
I did. Sorry, I stepped outside, noisy kids. No, I agree. I am a full 100% believer in the all of the above approach. So whatever works, to make this happen, I'm fully on board with it. It's land acquisition, conservation restrictions, these partnerships that we've done. I fully agree with that. It's there's many different ways to approach this. So I am not restricted to just any one method here.
Yeah, they, at the time, remember it was after the master plan, we had $3.5 million to, there was a group, and I know Andy Madden was involved. And they would look at things like, they went to some of the elderly, large property owners and would take donations in exchange for tax benefits and things like that. And that was pretty effective at the time, and that seems to have gone by the wayside. And I just don't think the town can continue to purchase every parcel that comes to sale, so I would like to see maybe some more creative approaches to that.
Is it possible it's gone to the wayside because
Those
the
people.
low-hanging fruit
Yeah.
has either been taken advantage of or is.
It was very surprising at the time when they went out and solicited some of these people. I mean, Clark Gowan. And he was thrilled with it. He put protections on that field on the corner of Crane and everything else. And I talked to him after the meeting. He said he was thrilled that he was approached and asked to do it because he didn't know how to do it, but he always had wanted to. So he's just one of, I think there's 4 or 5 people at the time that did gifts, some in exchange for tax credits or reduced sales to the town or other committees. And it worked pretty well at the time. So I think to say that it couldn't still work is not.
I didn't say it could.
No, I understand.
The frequency may. The opportunities may.
Maybe the fruit's a little highest, to work
Yeah.
a little harder,
Yeah.
that's all. And I just like to see that rather than. We got a lot of properties that be coming out.
Yeah.
We can't purchase them all as much as we would like. It'd be nice to get protections on some of them, maybe in other fashions.
Graham, can you explain the, how can the select board help the work of the committee, help create an environment where boards can work together? Can you give me some specifics on that?
Yeah, and I think that that's something that's actually, which I think this questionnaire is great, is that in the past, now I've only been on this for a couple of years, so I'm not, fully vested in the full story, but I know in the past people felt things were very siloed and that there was a lack of communication between these different relevant committees, and even just, trying to keep on top of what the planning board was up to and what properties were, coming in to be subdivided. So I think that culture has really changed though, in the last couple of years, and that's a big priority of Angus as well, is trying to get more communication. So I think that's something that is not a problem. I think it's something that we're rolling, towards a better solution here of these open communication between these different committees and making sure that, everyone is sort of on the same page with what's going on. And so that was, I think, what the thought was there of, coming from the select board, the town manager of keeping the communication lines open and that, everyone knows what everyone else is doing.
Scroll back up to the first page. So in terms of the membership, I just wanted to follow up on that. So it seems like there've been some quorum issues lately.
Yes.
You want to give us your thoughts on that and what you think the best way to manage that is?
Yeah, I think that it's been a challenge, especially the last, I don't know, I'd maybe say 4 or 5 months of trying to get a quorum together. And, some of it, I think that we have the, once Jessica left, we had the open associate spot. And it's been something that I've been kind of batting around ideas to fill that associate spot. But, no one's jumped out yet has been, that they're going to be a great fit. And so it's kind of languished a bit, is trying to find somebody that could fill that in. But since we've been having quorum issues lately, it really, I think that it's a more enticing thing to offer up a full membership or to move the existing associate member up to a full-time spot, I think would definitely help. But it's, everyone that's full says they would like to stay a full member.
One thing I might point out is that the past practice of communicating by email rather than an open meeting, I mean, that I think is part of why it's hard to get people to come to a meeting. Because it's just, a lot of stuff can be dealt with by email. So not only is that a violation of open meeting law? But I think it may also be compounding the problem of people not understanding how important it is to come to meetings and talk about things in public. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, so I would say I have been cracking down on that lately, since it was brought to my attention that there is no chatter allowed. So I know in the past that was kind of a protocol, but I think that I've been trying to shut that down as not an option for communication. I'm not sure, and there's been various reasons why people haven't been able to attend. It's just challenging because it's a generally pretty consistent schedule, and a lot of people have been on board for a long time, and they've got other stuff going on. So it's without calling anybody out, it's been difficult. And I've got the regular consistent people that are always there, but then sometimes when you're fighting to get a quorum, people dropping out an hour before, it's a bit frustrating.
Any other comments or questions from either you or Angus?
One thing I would note, the open space and recreation plan was approved in, says on the cover says 2018, but it was actually voted in like 2019. But as you know, Graham, that's got a 7-year life, so that's coming up in 2025. So that's going to expire under the state statute. It's and I haven't verified this, but Michelle told me that it was a 10-year. The statute says 10, but the state holds towns to 5 or 7, in our case 7. So that's one thing I noted it wasn't part of what's listed as part of the priorities is to work toward a updated open space and recreation plan, but whether that needs to be done by the end of 2025 or the end of 28, either way, I think that needs to be in the either the 2-year or the 5-year priorities or both. Because one thing we want to make sure is that doesn't creep up on the town, because I think the ability to implement that is going to have everything to do with whether the plan as approved reflects broad buy-in and is in fact reflective of the town's intent of what it's going to move forward with, so that it's really documenting what the town's objectives are rather than something that's competing with or add-ons. It's so that's going to be a really important process. I know there was some talk before Michelle left to maybe seek funding as early as the fall town meeting to support engaging consultant support for working toward a new open space and recreation plan. So I just want to be sure that that remains kind of front of mind for the committee.
And so
yeah, definitely. That's one I want to, that's a rather get on this sooner rather than later. And I agree. It was Michelle and I started the conversations about it. And that, probably, I think that's probably realistic. We can start thinking of, something for fall town meeting so we can get some funding and get moving on this.
So maybe the first step would be to confirm whether it's 10 years.
Yeah, and if it is, and Michelle said it, I'm
Yeah.
pretty darn sure.
I like that.
But I think that the question then is if the statute provides 10, but if administratively the state has been limiting them to 5 or to 7, in our case 7, I think, do we want to see if the state would consider extending our plan?
Right, why, I mean, if it is 10, how, I mean, where's their authority to insist on?
It's a good question. Yeah, so that, I think that warrants looking into that, because every now and then a state agency kind of exceeds its authority. Every now and then, yeah.
So would that be something that your office could?
Well,
since we don't have.
I would like to, I don't want to do it, I think it's something if as a community we agree, I think we ought to at least sound that out. It doesn't mean we couldn't choose to update it by the end of 2025, but as you guys know,
Get a couple other things going on.
Well, and just if you look backwards the last 12 to 18 months with the housing production plan and the hazard mitigation plan, it's just there's every hour we put toward updating a plan is an hour we don't have to all the other stuff. So so I think having some extra time, as far as I'm concerned, especially where I think the 2018 plan is a high quality plan. I don't think it's stale. I don't think it's gathering dust. It's something that's referred to regularly in the town's land acquisition efforts and other efforts, land management efforts. So I think it's still very timely. It's still a good document. So.
So Graham, could you maybe discuss this at the next meeting and see if the committee is on board with requesting an extension versus, the need to start a new one? That makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. I'll bring that up. Yeah, and just as a thought, I mean, is there someone that's just making sure that it's still compliant with any state statutes that have changed, or whatever? Like, just having a review done if we're going to stick with what we have, just to make sure that everything we have is good and in line. But no, I'll definitely bring that up. Yeah, if we can kick the can down the road, I'm not gonna argue with that.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, Mike, what are you here for?
I'm here for a couple of things, I think, EMA, holiday pay.
Okay, those are action items. Okay, so why don't we jump ahead to harbor committee appointments?
Both have random.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not seeing it. Oh, okay.
Next item, yeah.
Got it. Okay. So let's start with the harbor committee. So we asked the two of you to come in just to chat, see if you are meeting, what the situation is with the harbor committee. There's not been a lot of communications, so.
And if I could just preemptively offer some comments, so, and this is really maybe not new to some of you, been on the board for a while, but the harbor committee over the years has met sporadically. Back in 2018, when I started, really at the instigation in a good way of Steve and some of his neighbors. When I was new to the town manager role, he had brought to my attention some neighborhood concerns about speed of boats on the river, lack of presence in terms of any kind of enforcement. And so that had gotten me focused on the harbor. So I reached out to the committee. And they hadn't met at that point in quite a long time. And so my first 2 years, I think they met a few times, but it was sporadic. And then with the pandemic, things they stopped meeting. And I think at this point, I don't think the committee's met in probably almost 2 years. Brad Doerr's been the chair for a long time. He did express in this year's reappointment process, he did not seek reappointment, so he's not going to be on the committee. I don't know if you guys knew that, but so that's, I think, part of what instigated tonight's discussion is before the board, makes the action to reappoint, we wanted to have kind of, an open discussion of what is the committee's role, what should it be, what could it be, how does that align with the way the harbor committee bylaw is written, and if it doesn't line up with how that bylaw is written, should we be either revising or even rescinding the bylaw based on what the harbor committee's role could be or should be.
Mhm. And so the other members are Terry Richards, who's away,
Yeah, he's up.
Terry Hartford.
Terry Hartford, yeah, he's up in Canada today.
And then,
Tom
Tom
Goodwin,
Goodwin.
yeah.
and their appointments are 3 year.
I believe, one of them is up next year and they're staggered
Oh,
because they're
okay.
full terms.
Okay,
So there are 3 full members, the way it's currently configured, 3 full members with 3-year term and they're all staggered.
That's correct. And one thing, and Rick, you may or may not have been on the board when this first came up, but the idea of alternate members is actually, there's nothing in the bylaw about alternate members.
I do recall Tom, but-
Yeah, and at the time, this was, I think, my very first year of reappointments. It was like the spring of 2019, and we had people who had expressed interest in being part of the committee. The 3 longstanding members all were interested in reappointment, so the select board at the time, they didn't want to tip over the apple cart and not reappoint people who were interested in reappointment, but they also wanted to have an opportunity for new people to get involved. So they appointed 2 alternate members. They don't have any real, voting authority, but the harbor committee really doesn't have any voting authority at the committee anyway. So it was kind of seen as a you know, no harm, no foul, but the spirit of the appointment of both Steve and Brian was intended to give new people more of a seat at the table on issues to do with the river. Whether that was, you know, the various issues that come up, the harbor MOU with Salisbury, or the, you know, process for the docks, or the, you know, mooring permits. Or, you know, there was talk, as you know, about a potential study of, like a mooring field. Or really, there's any number of things that kind of relate somewhat to the harbor, and you can envision a time where more of those discussions happen at the harbor committee, but in fact, they just have rarely met over the last, many years.
So we would appoint either Steve or Brian as a full member and reappoint the other as an alternate. That,
I would
Yeah.
recommend that approach, yeah.
But didn't you just say there was no provision for alternate members on the
Correct.
bylaw?
Yeah. Well, just where you have two, so right now you have one vacancy with Brad's term expiring at the end of the week. So you have one vacancy, and then, you know, they're both interested, you know, that would be my recommendation.
So how many members are supposed to be full members?
3,
No, it's supposed to be 3, there are three full members.
Did you have 4 people interested? Okay.
correct, yeah.
So you,
Well, including 2 whose terms extend because they're 3-year terms, so both Terry and Tom Goodwin are both on for 1 to 2 years.
3 slots, 4 people, so you
Yeah.
make an alternate position,
Yeah,
throw a blind eye at it.
that was kind of the idea, yeah.
I'm just getting up to speed. on it.
No, that's exactly right, because unlike some other boards, it doesn't have any authority, so it doesn't like take votes, so it seemed like having someone who was, you know, nominally on the committee, but didn't really have any legal standing wasn't that big a deal, because the committee as a whole doesn't take any votes that are really binding.
And I'm thrilled that there are people interested.
Yeah, that was kind of, I
But
think, how
I
the board.
think by having us alternate, what you're essentially saying is that this person has a seat at the table for the discussion, maybe they,
It's fine.
and hopefully there will be discussion, which there hasn't been for 2 years, as far as we know.
Yeah.
so do either of you have any perspective on why the committee's not meeting, or, I mean, do you have any ideas about what could be changed to make it a more active committee?
I think that Angus stated it well, which is that it just has never really been a super active committee, so there's never been regularly scheduled meetings. There's kind of an ad hoc thing, and either Brian nor I as alternates are really in a position where.
To call a meeting.
We can't call meetings.
Yeah.
We just watch our email carefully.
Right, and in fact, with the chair's term about to expire, the current chair's term about to expire, and no meeting called to replace him.
Well, you know, I
What
think
happens?
that's, the committee as a whole
Yeah.
is really concerned with, speeding on the river.
Yeah.
Possible mooring fields, and just the general flow of the river remaining the same as it is. And not aware of any of, the problems that may arise that maybe, have conversations about here at town hall. They're not in tune with any of those things, so they think that maybe if things are going along smoothly, and which they kind of are. But whoever the chair is, I think it's Brad, doesn't seem to have an agenda or sort of mission statement to give. And I'm not throwing, I don't mean to throw him under the bus, but we just haven't got to that point yet. So, do we need to?
But I think there are some safety
And there's
things
some-
that we really need to keep an eye on, just, you know, we have Salisbury, we hired Salisbury to police the river for speeding, and is that a sufficient amount, or do we have sufficient coverage, or we monitoring that, and safety is a really key concern.
Yeah, so there's another topic, and it's related to speed, and that's, should we impose, an no-wake zone? Or if we have a no-wake zone currently, should it be a longer area? I mean, you know, so Steve, I think you live along the river, so, and so you're no doubt aware of erosion going on along the river, you know, of the river bank, and, you know, issues related to flooding, sea level rise. And should we, you know, I mean, strikes me that there's a topic that the harbor committee should be thinking about.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things is that, so I live right in front of the sandbar. And, I can count 60 boats at the sandbar on a crowded weekend. And that's not unusual. On any given nice day, even a weekday, for sunset, and especially if it's low tide and the sandbar is exposed, there's 20 or 30 boats that are anchored or beached on the sandbar. And there's also boats that are coming by. It's not a no wake zone, so there's boats that are coming by at 40 miles an hour. I would say the standard speed is, 20, 25 miles an hour. And there's a lot of people on jet skis and it is a very narrow channel there. Does that mean that we should, I'm not a big fan of no wake zones, because there's a lot of people who spend a whole, an hour and a half trying to get out.
They need to get from point A to point B,
Yeah.
which are
Yeah.
8 miles apart along the length of the river, yeah.
But there's also a big safety concern there, so is more policing the right answer? And where's the balance point? I think those are the kind of things that we should have a good discussion about.
My question is, which one of you, either one of you have a preference to be the alternate or the member, and then which one will call a meeting if we approve you?
Well, Steve's been an alternate member, been involved more than I have for a long time. So,
So you suggesting,
I will.
So you
I will
don't
be in the running.
you think that's a good thing, where it's only throwing Steve under the bus?
Yeah, I'm not gonna trip him on the way out to get into it. But I would say, I've not seen the harbor master boat other than Havel. I've not, I live on the river as well, down by the Ross Village Bridge, basically, towards Groveland.
Yeah.
And I've never seen the Salisbury Harbor master boat up this far, or is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have.
yeah, I've never seen it.
if you have a meeting, you can discuss that.
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna make a motion, we accept the reappointments. Steve Boyd as the full member and Brian Richards as the alternate member for terms to expire on 6/30/25.
Well, the full member would be 3 years.
Yeah, 6/30/27.
Okay, okay. Put
Second
that in the amendment.
All right, very good. Was that a second?
Yeah,
All right, all in favor?
well, you guys are good with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Promise not to trip on the way out the door.
So who is up next for reappointment, Jim?
Terry is up next year.
So perhaps we'll appoint you next year.
He's the secretary, I'm the secretary.
You can reorganize.
Yeah, well, we've organized this.
Yeah, I think that also brings up a point, which is that Brad led the committee, right? So how do we?
You
choose?
decide internally who the chair will be.
Yeah,
I would
you're-
suggest if
And I think,
you, because you're actively engaged and you want to do something.
yeah, I can see that as a point, but I also see that there are, people like Tom Goodwin who their knowledge of all the laws and regulations around, he has schooling related to all of this, and so I would rely on, it depends what the role is, if it's just to call the meetings and to make sure that we have the right agenda and working with other committees to understand what our overlap and interactions are.
Well, that seems like the kind of thing where if you can get a meeting scheduled, then that's subject to conversation at the meeting.
And I can help you with that.
I was just saying, we have plenty of people who can call a meeting, don't worry about that. You can figure that part out.
Too many people.
What you just described is what a chair would do. You don't have to know all the rules and regulations. You have to make sure the meeting.
Run the
is in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you
We
both.
just in favor of.
So,
Number, not the chair, okay.
Yeah, you have to decide with
The
the-
committee
Yeah,
has
the
that,
committee has itself ordinance, yeah.
All right,
and then we'll determine who we want to meet and.
Yeah. Yeah, so Jim's, he'll contact you tomorrow, see about getting you sworn in. And then, yeah, let's talk about getting something on the calendar in July with the committee.
one thing we have talked about is revising the bylaw because it is outdated, and so that's something we'd like to
Yeah, the
do.
bylaw's definitely stale, and some of the fees in there are stale,
Right.
yes, it really needs engagement, and that's part of what, you know, brought this up, is we need a harbor committee that's really helping to chew on that, and get into the details of that.
All right, great, thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate some of you, anything else?
Yeah.
All right, Angus.
So you have open space committee as well, did you want to deal with that? Those three appointments, or?
Yes.
So regarding open space, and the problem with getting a quorum.
Yeah.
I know Graham didn't. I don't think Graham wanted to, you know.
Yeah, he's
Good, Graham, good. I wasn't gonna say anything bad about you, but I wonder, are there particular people who consistently are not able to make meetings and?
Well, that's not throwing anybody under the bus. It's
Yeah.
a good question, because if
Yeah.
that's creating a problem, like when we were on school committee, if you miss 2 meetings, they call you out on it, so
Yeah.
you give it up or get it.
Right, exactly, because if you're gonna be on the committee, you gotta be on the committee, you need to be there.
These are all Zoom meetings.
Yeah. Right.
Same.
Yeah.
So Graham, do you wanna weigh in, or do you?
So I'll answer generically. Yes, there's been generally someone that's been struggling to attend.
Well, so, if you don't mind me asking, Graham, you have a quorum of 4, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, you're not saying all 7 people have to meet.
No,
Okay.
but there are,
No, just 4, including myself. So I just need 3 other people to show up.
Yeah.
And does the alternate count into next?
so one suggestion might be is to make David Parrott the full member and assign Jean to be an associate member.
So you know more about this dynamic, and we do.
I mean, I go to their meetings, so,
Okay,
I feel a little uncomfortable doing that without having that conversation with her, you know. Maybe one
'Cause
solution.
I
is to just-
emailed her, just to chime in. I emailed her this afternoon and asked if she wanted to go to associate because they were doing appointments, and she said that she wanted to stay full. Just, chiming that in.
But she's gonna have to show up, that's the problem.
So,
That was kind of a cute laugh.
all right, so how heavy in hand do we want?
well, why,
Yeah.
could we make a motion, could we appoint 2 people tonight? Or 3 people, including David Parrott as an associate, and allow Jean to come in and speak for herself.
Then there won't be a full position available if we do that. I don't have a problem making the if
Why wouldn't there be a full position available?
He's suggesting leaving it vacant.
Leaving it vacant until our next meeting, or, within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, actually, yeah. I did have another question. Why is the reappointment date for this June 15th? Is that the case for all?
what's that?
That's
It's
right.
it's in the bylaw.
Yeah, it's in the bylaw. Why?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just, when I read it, I was like, why is that?
So
I do know when I started, they often did that. They
Yeah.
often, and they like to do that, and I think it was, I don't know if it was Joe or, I think it was Joe. He didn't like things waiting to the last minute, and so they would make their appointments through June 15th, basically to force the hand of the subsequent board to not wait till June 30th to make appointments. It was during my time that, at one point I said to them, that makes it really messy, because with town reports, it's a lot cleaner to say these were the members during fiscal year X, rather than these were the members for 11 and a half months, and then 2, like, it just makes it messy.
Yeah.
So since I've been here, we've really gotten them all on a fiscal year basis, other than like Board of Fire Engineers, where it's by statute, other than that.
Okay, but then that conflicts, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good housekeeping.
Yeah, I mean, there's not other things to worry about that.
Yeah, no, but
The
that's.
grand scheme of things is a minor conflict, but,
I'll make a motion that we appoint Graham, Bachelor, Carol Decker, and Dave Parrott as full members for terms running through June 30th, 27, and Jean Lambert as the associate member of the term running through June 30th of 2025.
All right, second. Any further discussion?
I would just note that I think, I think it's, having David be a full member is great in terms of just exactly the point Graham was talking about improved, communication and coordination between the board, where David's a member of the Concom. So I do think there's an objective, plus to have, even though we know David is gonna be involved regardless, because that's the kind of person he is, but I think having him a full member and a voting member is.
But as an associate, he doesn't fulfill the requirement for quorum, that's why that's critical.
Exactly, that's right,
You
that's
can
right.
fix that problem.
Yep.
It's been at every meeting.
Yeah.
Even our kind of associate.
So that helps them to get their quorum.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, Graham?
All right, who's gonna break the news?
You.
Me. Oh, that was bad enough when I present the wetlands bylaw. Now this. Oh, all right, here we go.
Jean, call me, Graham, if you would like.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll see what I can. Yeah, I'll go have a couple beverages and see if I can send a nice email off. There we go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks.
All right. Go to town manager now?
Well, it's up to you. I mean, it's obviously gonna be a long meeting. We've been here a while. I think if it's okay, why don't we just, if there's things in item B, A through I that you wanna ask me about, maybe, rather than, because I don't wanna sit here and talk for 15 minutes,
Okay,
unless that's what you want me to do.
so,
Let's put it this way, it's gonna be a long meeting, and I know when that clock hits 10, I turn to a pumpkin.
Yeah,
So I like your approach.
yeah,
so I would, while Graham is still on item C, on town manager updates on Sawmill Brook.
yes, good catch, yeah.
So I was at the open space meeting earlier tonight and,
Is Graham listening?
yeah,
He is.
Okay.
so there was quite a bit of discussion about how much content is on the sign and people felt like it was too much. And,
I thought so too.
yeah, but so I said that I would ask you, and I guess how much of that is required by the grant? I mean, I know a fair amount.
I don't think it's driven by the grant. I think the main requirement for the grant is that it acknowledge the, financial support of the Commonwealth.
Mhm.
And, I think that's it.
Oh, okay, I was under the impression it was part of the land management plan.
No, I think there was I think there's an intent to have enough content that kind of is reflective of the land management plan, but that's not, I actually was just reading the grant award letter conditions again today, because
Yeah.
we're checking off the boxes there, and I think there's a lot of latitude on the
Okay.
content at the time. And actually, the other thing, which I said in the transmittal memo, at this point, we're gonna do a paper sign laminated. We're not gonna send a sign to get fabricated in aluminum until the property line issue is formally resolved by the court, which could be months. So I think,
But doesn't this have to be approved? I mean, we're not gonna change the language of the sign, right?
you could,
Okay.
yeah, basically, yeah, I mean, you saw what I sent to the state today. We sent a photo today of the constructed parking, because that's one of the requirements by June 30th. So we will send a photo that there's a sign, it's posted, we can even send it a sign. But I don't think that, they're gonna check the box and cut a check for the grant. They're not going to, and we can let them know if we change the content, honestly, in a couple of months. They're not getting into the content of the sign.
Okay, all right.
They just wanna make sure the Commonwealth is recognized by people visiting the property, they know that the state helped.
So relative to the content, I have two comments.
Yeah.
And it says dogs are welcome subject to all town bylaws. Well, that presumes that somebody's gonna have a booklet with the town bylaws and they know what they entail. It should state what they are. It should say, dog has to be on a leash or on the voice command. Otherwise, that's a useless statement to those people.
Yeah, so the content that comes after that phrase. I mean, I think that.
I would limit it, and say dogs should be, exactly what the bylaw says, under voice command, on leash control or voice command at all times.
Actually, I don't know, this says under ownership control.
Whatever the phrasing is, yeah. There's that, and the other comment, which I always like when you've got a sign, shouldn't there be a little thing that says you are here?
So that would be.
Well, no, when you look at the sign, I want to know where I
Yeah,
am, so I.
there will, this map is a dummy map, this is a placeholder.
Hey,
It's
let's
not-
not get nasty though.
Yeah. But yeah, the map, I should have even just blanked it out, because that's not what the map is gonna be.
Okay,
Right now, Greenbelt is working on an updated map, that's gonna, have accurate trails. Actually, Graham, was out over the weekend with a GPS, actually getting the exact location of the trail, so, yeah, the map's gonna be very different than what you see, but yeah, you are here is certainly a good thing to make sure. It includes.
Yeah,
I totally agree, yeah.
I think on the text that, that text could be winnowed down by 50%.
yeah,
And still say, have the same meaning.
So in spite of all the comments that there was too much, people thought that that right of way description was important. And that should be added on all towns, trail signs going forward, that's the last bullet. But it doesn't have to be that wordy, you could just say trail right of way is.
Right, even that could be
Yeah.
decreased by 30 or 40%.
no, but actually, that was good when I saw that.
Yes, yeah.
I know most people struggle with that,
Yeah.
when they do.
So how do we want to handle this? When do you need an answer, Angus? By the end of the week?
Yeah, we're gonna print it.
Yeah.
Laminate it, and Butch has already got the sign post up, so we're just gonna mount it on plywood until it gets fabricated permanently, which we're not even gonna get that ball rolling until the land court process plays out.
All right, so if we just quickly go through the bullets, do we need item bullet one? That seems,
I don't think so.
yeah. Do we need bullet two?
I think, I think bullet 2 could be combined with bullet 4, where it says walkers, hikers, snowshoers, cross-country skiers and cyclers, open parentheses, on existing trails only, close parentheses, welcome. Just,
Okay,
and then eliminate 4 can go. I understand the problem, of people building jumps, ramps, or other structures,
yeah.
that's not that common, and. I think
It does start happening all the time.
But it busies up the sign, I think it,
So in general, what content do you think should be on the sign? What's the most
I
critical?
didn't know we we're gonna do that tonight, to recraft the wording, this would take an effort, so.
Yeah, so then how do we want to handle it?
I will say print up the temporary sign as is, and then modify the language when you get closer to the permanent sign. You could spend a good couple hours trying to craft this the right way, and reasonably should have input from other committees if you're gonna do that.
Was, yeah, so that was why we did talk to the open space committee and other committees have had.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, this has been a circuit, and I don't disagree with your point, but for months, it's been, it's been difficult, it's been. Input's been solicited from committees and haven't really been forthcoming.
yeah,
Yeah, so I'm not suggesting we word craft this, but I just wanted to know, like, in general, what bullets, I can take a shot at editing it if I know what you're.
I mean, obviously you wanna address issues that could be potential problems, so that people are aware of what they can or cannot do there.
Yeah, I don't think the equestrian parking is necessary, because it's obvious there's no parking for host trailers there, there's only 2 car parking spots,
well, not only that, but where is this trail, where's the sign actually going to be?
Courthouse Lane.
Is it gonna be on Poorhouse Lane,
Yeah.
it's not gonna be in 100 feet or anything,
Correct.
okay?
Yeah.
So it is where people would come if they were going to park, and if somebody had in their mind that they were gonna park the horse trailer, they would actually see this at that. Okay.
Now, how in depth do you get, no camping, no fire, blah, 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 that's not on there, but a lot of people, when you hike, it's the first thing they look for.
Hours. Specific hours for trails, do we?
Yeah. I always, personally, I don't like hours on trails, because some people like to hike at night.
All right.
I think Chris is right, just do it as it is for right now, temporarily, and we'll get it right when it comes to spending money.
Are we gonna wanna spend the,
This just, that's, this is the parking area.
So this is actually, okay, I haven't seen it since that was done, great.
Yeah, I just got that this afternoon.
Oh, and it was just done today, or?
In the last few days,
Great, okay,
last few
good.
days, yeah. So I think they did a really.
Have you
nice
walked
job.
there yet, Chris?
Yeah,
You will soon enough.
I've been in there before when it was supposed to be, so.
Yeah.
all right, I'm just gonna take a shot at modifying the language and,
I'm very comfortable you doing it. Go for it.
all right. And so when do
I
you,
wouldn't mind having,
when
thanks.
do you, when do you wanna send this in? Wednesday?
No,
Make the sign?
we can print it Friday,
Okay,
post it and take a snapshot, then it's posted. It's gonna be fine, yeah.
okay, anything else people wanna ask about the? How about the updates on the hiring processes and staffing transitions?
So we are in discussions right now with, filling both the conservation agent and the land and building services admin position. We've got, really good candidates for each, neither are, official yet, but we're, into the, kind of well into the recruitment process. We've also posted the, public works, vacant position.
Okay,
But I don't know, was that just like keep.
That was,
under town manager update,
BH, yeah.
yeah, so unless there's questions on any of these, we'll just, a lot of this content has been emailed around already, so I think.
Yep. Yeah, and it's all, I think everything had backup in the packet, so if you read your packet.
Can I ask about the page school?
Yeah.
Is there any increased cost or this all?
Within budget, yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be done by June 30th, but we thought extending it just in case would be wise, if weather crops up or whatever, but no, they confirmed last week in writing, it's gonna be within the budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Seems like they're a pretty good vendor, as,
Yeah.
I'll say while we're talking that, the water pipe, that went amazingly fast.
Yeah,
That was pretty impressive to see.
All right, item C, the Stage Center, that's just the activities that are in the packet, right? There's nothing.
Yep,
to report.
correct, yeah.
Item D, C, the Cable Advisory Committee, so this letter is their input on what should be in the new contract.
Just, I appreciated that, because I had no, you're saying, what do you put in the contract? We had no idea, so I appreciate their input on that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so they went through contracts with other, for other towns and pulled out things that they wanted to see.
They said upfront grant of 15,000 to create a dedicated studio, so they're saying to the cable companies, one of both. We have two contracts, correct?
Right.
So they're gonna want 7,500 from each, or?
Well, it depends how we do these contracts. They have different expiration dates, but you can do them both at the same time. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
I recall that we could do them both at the same time, but
And that's typical to.
So if they have, so we'd have to bring one in out of sanction. Out of its currency fund,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, we'll have to confirm that, but I
Yeah.
remember somebody saying that you could do that with the second company, so you don't have to go through the process 2 years in a row. But
How do you feel, Angus, about creating a studio space in the second floor meeting room? Does that conflict with, I know that room is, or my impression is that room is beginning to be used more.
It is indeed.
So is that gonna create a conflict in that space?
Yeah, I would definitely be concerned about anything that was seeking to use that exclusively. That's not how I read,
Right.
What they wrote, but it's definitely something that would need to be looked at closely, because, yeah, we definitely rely on that as an active meeting space.
Yeah, I mean, if it's available, I think it's great use of the space, but the question is it currently will continue to be available for all?
Yeah, and also, we've got, an intent that be used by more of the, kind of, upstairs, boards, what planning board, Concom, water commission. I think part of why we made the investment to, make it, to facilitate the, hybrid and remote meetings was with the intent that would get more public meeting space. And, there's certainly, there's plenty of times that the first floor is booked and the second floor is in uses, so. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if it was an exclusive use of that space, I think that would be a concern. If it was a shared use, that's a different thing, so I certainly would want to rule anything out. But
Yeah, I mean, I
understand
think they're
that.
talking about having all their equipment there, and I think I would be concerned about having equipment in space that's used by other committees. I mean, when they brought that up, I said I wasn't sure that was gonna apply,
Yeah,
but I don't know where else they could be.
Well, would be interested to know just what exactly a studio entails. What's the layout, how much equipment is there?
So they were talking about, how, I don't know if you remember, there's a long table along the left wall. So they're talking about just a table with 2 chairs, some kind of weird screen behind. I don't understand the lingo exactly. But so like having an interview recorded.
I guess what they call the green screen or something.
Yeah, it wasn't that, but it was something like that, yeah. So, and, they're purchasing all this equipment, they're gonna need a place to store it. They were talking about using the offices in the back. I said, well, that's Brian's office now, it's not available, so. That needs to be thought out a little bit more, and that's not really directly part of the contract, but, yeah. They do need a dedicated space if they're gonna expand this operation. Right now, their big push is doing the veteran interviews. They're trying to train, they bought the cameras and they're training people to go out and do veteran interviews, so. I'm surprised they didn't put, they had really strong feelings about which attorney we should use. There's some person that specializes in these kind of contract negotiations. And I said I thought we'd use KP Law. But they didn't put it in there, so.
Do they agree with KP Law or they have somebody else?
There's somebody that's supposed to be the attorney to use. I don't know anything about who that's, they looked up on KP's website and there was no communications specialist noted as one of it. Anything else on this?
So what is I guess it's probably in the current contract, but I don't recall what is the PEG funding percentage currently? They refer to returning to the past level of 5%.
Yeah, I think it's down to 3%, and that was definitely an issue that was, during the last negotiation, the companies were pretty adamant that the economics, because of all the streaming services, don't support the type of PEG funds. They don't have the same number of customers, so, that was something the board at the time agreed to, the reduced percentage based on changes in market conditions.
I think having 2 vendors kind of hurts us, because if there was one vendor, we double the business, maybe 5% would fly, but.
But yeah, I mean, obviously that was negotiated. It wasn't just, the board at the time didn't just like say, oh, great, less money. I mean, it was a real back and forth, and
Right.
That was what they agreed to based on that.
So are they, I don't know if they're at what they consider to be full stride yet, but if they are at full stride, are they running through? I know there's a considerable balance.
No,
Right.
they're not using, no.
So.
And they're not at full stride, based on what they would like to be.
Right, so, okay, so then that doesn't really tell us. If, will 5% or will 3% actually meet the current need, if they do get up to full stride. But there's these are 5-year, 10-year contracts now, right?
Yeah.
So, 10 years is a long time if you get the number one.
But we've generated quite a surplus on 3%.
Right. Well, how much of that? Are they continuing to generate a surplus now at 3%? At 5%, they definitely were.
Yeah.
And are they continuing to at 3%?
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically the only bills up until this past year have been for Adamstone's time.
Okay,
Yeah, but now they're beginning to buy purchase equipment and, start looking at programming, so,
yeah,
yeah, it's hard to know how much they need. else this.
I give the specific items.
I asked him, he said he had nothing else to do tonight, he just wanted to hang out.
Exactly.
He's looking for a quiet place to hang out.
Yeah, we're getting ready to move on to action items. All right, are we, we're done with the Keel advisory?
Yeah.
So next steps on this, Angus, is
Well,
fit it into the work plan.
yeah, I mean, just speaking frankly, it's not something that's gonna get any real time from my office for the foreseeable future.
Yeah,
So I don't wanna stand in the way if some other, if there's, some, you know, we can support. It's just hard to see with, I mean, I know, you know, we have later on the agenda about the expiration notice, well, that's the end of December 2026.
yeah.
Given what we've got in front of us, it's just not like a near-term
Mhm.
priority. That can change if the board tells me it is a near-term priority, then obviously that would change, but other than that, I think a question that we should consider at some future meeting is whether the select board wants to be the primary negotiating entity for the town. And if so, how does the CAC fit into that? The board could ask the CAC to serve that role, but yeah, there's pros and cons to both approaches.
So to meet the timeline, when do you think we should start in earnest?
So I know one of them expires, I think, the end of 25 and the other 26. So I think the one that expires the end of 25, we really ought to start this calendar year.
Okay.
yeah.
Fall, maybe?
Yeah, I think if we can find time in the fall, it would be great to start the conversation.
Yeah.
To at least start some dialogue.
Well, one point, we're gonna invite the rep in?
Mhm.
Okay. is that-
Yeah,
So maybe
we can do that. It's just a matter of, you know, it's
let's
just,
target the fall. To
Yeah,
invite them to
yeah.
another meeting and start the
Yeah.
conversation.
yeah, man, yeah, that's.
Okay. All right. Mike, are you here for the staff reappointments, the EMA?
In the holiday, but
U of H.
So, so on the staff so we've got staff reappointments and then EMA reappointments. So you had the memo from town council, circulated separately on, you know, as you'll recall from last year at this time, we'd asked, or I kind of brought to mention to the board that over the many years, the board's kind of made these appointments every year, and I haven't fully understood why with some, so I had sent a question to Tim about a year ago, and got a response about a week ago, it turns out, so. And he basically had, I think, some, you know, good advice on which reappointments are actually necessary or important, and which really are not necessary, and in some cases, could really muddy the waters, particularly where the select board's not the appointing authority in the first place for some of the things that historically have been reappointed annually. So Rebecca and I worked to basically retool the appointment list, and that's what you have in front of you. So those that continue to show a requested appointment date through next year, so that includes building commissioner and related positions, chief elected official or officer. Those are things where town council has advised it is either necessary or advantageous to have those happen every year. But those where we've added the delineation at will are things that town council has advised really don't need to happen every year. And so the use of the term at will is intended to reflect, you know, people or employees at will. They can leave, we can let them go, like they're not under contract. In an earlier draft, Rebecca used the term indefinite. I didn't really like that term, because it seems a little, you could read it multiple ways. At will isn't great either, it was kind of the best terminology we could come up with, but what it means in practical terms is if you were to vote this as shown here, and then I'll pull up the second page, is the public safety, and then we've got EMA as a separate page. If you were to vote something at will, basically you wouldn't see it again. Next June, you wouldn't see it again. So like the ADA coordinator or the town clerk, where, you know, the town manager is the appointment authority for the town clerk. So if Jim at some point was to leave us and we were to hire a new town clerk, that's not something that would then come to the board every year. And while I think people who've been on staff for a long time understand that this is just kind of how they've always done it, it is something I've had to explain to different employees over the years as to, I know your name's on the list for reappointment, but don't worry about it. You know, it's kind of an awkward conversation to explain, to them, well, why am I on a reappointment list? And that was part of what came through in the town council's opinion was if someone's on a reappointment list, it's implicit that they might not be reappointed. And especially when you're dealing with union employees who have, you know, bargaining, you know, contractual rights to certain process. You know, the point that Tim made was the board couldn't in practice not reappoint. So why bring something in front of you and ask you to vote something if you really don't have a choice of voting one way or the other? So you can see on the second page with police and dispatch, we changed all of the union positions to at will, but kept the reserve officers to a year, which Tim said is definitely important with law enforcement to have that annual kind of, so it's very clear who has that authority and who doesn't. So that's the.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm confused.
Yeah, of course.
Within the executive session packet was the listing and Tim's justification.
Yeah.
For the reappointments and stuff. Now it says like building inspector, says appointing authority is the town manager.
Mhm.
So do we have to reappoint or do you do that?
Well, that's another question.
This doesn't say who
right.
does the appointments and the reappointments.
Right, and that's where, yeah, I mean, I got that, I think, on Thursday, so it was kind of.
The two don't align is what I'm saying.
Right,
So
yeah,
we're not gonna make reappointments to something that you appoint, I don't assume.
Right, well, so for instance, some of the things that have been on this, in like treasurer collector, going forward, that's really a town manager appointment. Tim's advice was because last year's document at this time had an end date of June 30th of 2024, it would make sense to have something voted so that it doesn't create a paper trail that could suggest that that appointment ended. So that was the rationale of keeping some of these on.
I mean, other than police, select board is pretty limited,
Yeah.
So
appointing authority.
police, town accountant, town manager, and yeah, that's it. That's pretty much
Animal
it.
control, I mean.
Yeah.
The town accountant actually has a contract, a 3-year
Correct,
contract.
that's correct, yeah.
Again, that's what Zang is correct.
Yeah.
We got nothing to do.
Yeah, so,
Oh,
so would you look for us to approve it, Angus, or just?
Well, let's see, so.
it seems like there ought to be another column
Exactly.
Yeah.
that says appointing authority.
Mhm.
Well, actually, there should be only any
If-
appointments that we're responsible for, right, that should be it.
Right, in which case it'd be, 8 line items, including
Yeah.
5 reserve officers.
I don't want to.
So does the fact that the select board in the past has appointed all these? I mean, do we need to officially make them that will? I'm just asking. Yeah,
Let's see,
because we haven't.
so, yeah, I think Chris has made a good point on the building commissioner that. Tim's saying he recommends reappointing on an annual basis, but that doesn't make you the appointment authority,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, this list for us should, and again, we don't even reappoint you because you got a contract, same with the
Right.
town accountant.
Right,
So basically, it's gonna be police,
And police,
And,
reserve police.
animal control,
Okay.
and board of fire engineers. Our list would be distilled down to that.
well, not board of fire engineers, because they're appointed by the,
Says select board on Tim's list.
Yeah, we have historically appointed. a board.
I'm sorry, the board, yes, the board, yeah, the board is correct, yeah, right,
Again, before shouldn't we clean this up?
we can take another, especially with.
So we also part-time dispatch, we also appoint part-time dispatchers, right?
Well, but I'm actually the appointing authority for dispatchers as well.
Okay.
So I think maybe table this since you're meeting a week from tonight, which is the first day of the fiscal year, so. Even if, Yeah, because I just got, as you saw, I just got Tim's opinion Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
My initial read of it, there were a couple of items that were incorrect in terms of, police he was referring to was, town manager appointments, which are not, so I do think it, and that's why I sent him kind of that report on the appointment authority.
I'd like to see it broken up into two separate lists, one that the town manager appoints and one that the select board appoints.
Yeah,
And that's, you do your thing, we'll do our thing.
that would be good.
All right, and then what about on EMA?
EMA, I know that the former directors always said it was important to have a list that could be provided to show that people were appointed. Still, the appointing authority is the town manager, it's not,
Okay,
not the select board. So that could be something that could be, something that I write a memo to Chief Dwyer as the EMA director and say the following are appointed, and that creates the paper trail, but it's not a, doesn't need a board action.
okay. All right, item,
We'll just put that on for next Monday.
the SRO agreement.
Yeah.
There's just a couple changes to that, right? Minor.
Yeah, really to change the financial contribution to match what,
The budget is.
yeah, well, so yeah, what it looks like what happened, and the new business manager, Susanna, I think is trying to reverse engineer what happened, because the amount that was actually paid in the current fiscal year exceeded what was in the contract, and I think what happened is Greg, presumably carried a higher amount than what the 2.5% that the agreement specifies, knowing that the language as written provides for 2.5 or such greater amount. So presumably they budgeted a greater amount, and then when the time came, they just paid us the amount they budgeted, even though it actually exceeded what they were obligated to provide. So for next year, what we did is took the amount that was actually paid in FY 24, which was about $2,000 more than what was obligated, adjusted that up by 2.5%, but then set a cap of 3% for next year, because that's the amount that's actually in their budget. So let's say, a higher COLA was agreed with the union, that will create a shortfall that would then be adjusted in the following year. So, which is, I think it's just a consequence of having a collective bargaining agreement that's not executed at this late stage of the year.
Okay. Any other questions on that motion?
No, yeah, I move that we, accept or we approve the SRO agreement as modified. Including the, increase in, annual dollar amount, 2%. And the other change.
Just to update the dates,
Oh, yeah, and
the effective dates, that would be us.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, let's move ahead to item H, which is the request for employee payout. We're going to use holiday pay. Has this been done in the past, Mike?
So we run into an issue when there's holidays that are coming up late in the year. And with some of our staffing, a lot of officers have put in for a holiday and then have taken it back just because they'd be only the one officer on, but we just couldn't find the coverage, whether it be lack of reserve coverage. And I know that in the past, prior to when I took over moving all the approvals over into Jenny's office, that it was easier for us to manage the days to sort of swap them out as a vacation day as the year went on. But talking with Angus, I think the best way to look at this down the road is for us to have something, agreed upon that makes sense at this stage of the game. The numbers that I passed along to Angus were, I think Sergeant Parento is pretty much used all his time, so he was one of the ones that still had a lot of time left. He was able to get coverage and get time off.
So we're looking at just probably less than what I presented. I should have a better idea this week.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to figure out, has the precedent already been set to do this, or are we setting a precedent to do this going forward, which, we need to be concerned about. So, to your knowledge, has this been department practice in the past?
No, I don't think there's been a payout. I think it's just been swapped for vacation time in the past.
Oh.
Before.
I get a little more concerned than precedent. We've got we've gone through these union contracts. What's the wording in it? It either provides for it or it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't, right, in this?
Well, it's so. Between the police and the dispatch, there's different language in the contracts, and it seems like the dispatch has language that, let's see, makes it somewhat clear. So I'm reading from the dispatch contract, when a holiday falls on a day when an employee does not work, an employee may choose to be paid the 8 hours holiday pay or take 8 hours off with pay at a later date. So the dispatch contract seems to have language that Jenny reads to give clear.
Would allow this to happen.
Yeah, but the police contract doesn't have the same language. Now, Jenny, shared her opinion that the holiday section of the police contract in general has a lot of language that she feels could be read and to be internally inconsistent. And I reread it quickly this afternoon after she and I had met, and I see what she means, and I kind of reminded her that this Friday is actually our last opportunity to put anything new on the table with the contracts. So we agreed we would meet tomorrow, and I didn't get a chance to talk to Chief Dwyer because this was pretty late in the day today, but I think that's something that it seems that if we're gonna do something, it should be consistent with the contract. And if there's something we're gonna do that's not in the contract, it seems like that ought to be built into the contract. Because I do feel once, if there hasn't been a financial payout in the past, and then there is, I definitely feel that's gonna be held as past practice, which is then gonna become basically something we've agreed to. But obviously we're coming up on the end of the fiscal year, so there's not a lot of time, but you do have a meeting tomorrow night where the collective bargaining agreements are on that agenda. Let me see. So you said Parento no longer needs this consideration, right?
Last time it's checked, yes.
Okay, so that police and so both police officers, so.
So there's 6 days for one,
And Liam was in the academy, so he wasn't able to use his time.
I can definitely tell you that, Jenny would strongly favor paying out the time as opposed to carrying it into the new fiscal year. For both logistical and financial reasons, because obviously then it's accruing at the new year's rate rather than.
But if it's not in the contract, you're setting the. Doesn't it get messy?
Well, I think part of the question we have is we don't know whether, where Chief Dwyer said earlier correctly that this was all. It's only fairly recent that the finance department's had more visibility on the tracking of these things, and even then, their tracking of accruals is vacation, sick, and personal days. It's not the holiday pay. That's really always been something that I think the police admin has primarily done with the chief. So whether in prior years, people, officers have been allowed to carry things forward past the fiscal year, Jenny wouldn't necessarily know that.
and might you have no sense as to whether or not.
It wouldn't be carried over, well, in a sense, it would be carried over because it would be applied out of vacation time. But that was prior to me, that was, I think, prior to Jack.
Right, so that's a little bit of our concern is we don't know what we don't know, and so we don't want to not do something and face some kind of repercussion. But we don't really know how it's been handled in the past. We do know as like I said, there's not been a payout, we do know that.
Yeah.
So if there is provision in the dispatch contract for that payout, is there a reason that it wouldn't be appropriate to do it for employees? I mean, there's obvious financial, you know.
I mean, part of the overall package, you know, there are some things in dispatch that aren't in police.
Yeah.
There was compensation. Yeah, I don't know that we probably need to talk about this tomorrow night, right?
I have no clue how to address it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Defer to Angus and Jen, they know more about it.
What do you suggest, Angus?
If you weren't meeting tomorrow night, I would have a different feeling, but since you are, and you have the contracts on the,
Yeah,
you know, my feeling is that if it's going to be done, then it ought to become part of
yeah, I
what's
agree.
put on the table in the bargaining process, because if you do it, you're gonna be held to it going forward anyway.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna do it, I think it ought to be memorialized in the contract so that future staff and future board members and future chiefs over the years all read it the same way, because part of, you know, where you get in trouble is when there's
Multiple,
invisible ink or unwritten rules, that's where things can get lost with institutional turnover. And then you can get in trouble with the union, because they can point to past practice when really current staff are just reading the language and saying, we're on.
And that's why I'm hesitant to approve it just without knowing, because it does create a past practice, and we're going through these contracts right now, they hold you to everything.
Well, I think the way I interpret what you were saying is that there may be past practice that we don't know about.
There may be.
Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, when I talked to Jenny this afternoon, she thought that, you know, if we could. You know, figure out if that had been done in the past by, you know, by Sue. That would be important to know, because, you know, that. That's something that could be, you know, could then, if you chose not to do it, it could become.
Alright.
you know,
Yeah, and
basis of-
I lost multiple days without that option, so, in the past, so.
Yeah.
As far back as I can recall, which is a long time, that was never an option on both sides.
Okay. I mean, I'm definitely, you know, especially like with the addition of Juneteenth being so late in the fiscal year. And where the holiday doesn't carry forward the way vacation, at least you have the 120 days of the new year to use it. It kind of sets up this situation that you'd think it's gonna happen every year. And that's not good. But it seems like however it's handled should be not just the way they handle it this year, but the way they ought to be handling it kind of going forward, at least for the next 3 years with the new contract.
Okay,
So I think if you have some time tomorrow, and me, you and Jenny can just put our heads together, because I know she has some thoughts on, you know, how it's handled in other towns she's worked in, and I think you'll find them agreeable. What she's suggesting, but we want to make sure that it's intentional how it's done, and that.
and
That
then,
we're prepared to live with that kind of going forward.
all right, and then you.
Yeah, we could
To
bring
us
it tomorrow night, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So sorry you sat through all of
I
that.
can't be there tomorrow night, I hope that's okay.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, tomorrow night's meeting was kind of added at the 11th hour.
You can,
So-
you can reach me by cell, but I'll be at another.
So as things up until this point, tomorrow's night, content in tomorrow night's meeting was going to all be an executive session, but this will have to be an open session.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we could either repost in the morning, or you could add it as unanticipated at the time of posting, and just when you recess from the executive session, you can add it to an executive session and vote it.
But the discussion of the impact on the contract and so forth.
Yeah,
And then the executive.
yeah, right.
I don't think it's executive session to come to resolution.
Till you come to a resolution.
All right, Mike, thanks.
Thanks, you need me for anything else?
No, sorry.
No, no worries.
You can hang for another hour.
I got to run an errand.
See you later, Mike.
All right, let's go back to item
Yeah.
E. Item F, so this was the memorandum of agreement with Essex County Greenbelt, there were questions on that. I spoke to Vanessa and the MOA is for the CR itself, not the land purchase. So that's why the dollar amounts didn't line up.
Which item you said be about?
F, E.
Yeah.
So that was your question last time, Chris, right? Because then you can get the numbers to add up. The reason why is because it doesn't reflect non-CR purchases. So the owner paid, the purchaser paid $1 million. That's not related to the CR, that's the unrestricted property.
Okay, again, I didn't even jump back into it, it's fine,
Okay.
I'm good.
Is this normally something that would happen before closing or before?
No, she said because it's the CR, it's gonna take months for the CR to be ironed out, so there's no rush. If we don't want to take it up tonight, we don't have to, but I didn't see a need to have her come in. She's read it all to me. So given that it wasn't in the package, you wanna put it in the next packet and so that you can look at it before we vote? Are you guys okay?
It is in the packet.
It isn't.
Yeah,
Oh, it is.
yeah.
All right,
It's
so we're-
EF,
what's that?
it's EF.
No, I just didn't
She
recall
just
that
seen
the
Okay,
itself was in there.
okay.
So can we discuss it then?
Yeah.
Do you have any other issues with it?
I have none.
Okay, Chris, did you have concerns?
My issue is gonna be not just this, but all contracts. Has this been reviewed by Angus, or who reviews it before it gets here? Council?
No,
So nobody's reviewed this.
no, I mean, in this case, Greenbelt attorneys review it, so, but specifically, no, it's not been reviewed by legal for the town's protection. The number of contracts that go through the town, absolutely, I'm not sure we want to commit to having.
Somebody's gotta read them somewhere at some point, that's what I'm saying. I just see, and that's my only comment for tonight's overall meeting, all contracts and legal documents need to be reviewed. We need to know who's reviewed, and any comments, changes, or concerns
Mhm.
before they get here. I mean, because us to try and review it and make modifications is almost impossible at this point. I feel like we have potential to get in trouble if we're not careful. I'm not gonna, I'll go with this one tonight, but I think going forward, somebody's gotta put eyes on these things.
So if it's not like a vendor contract, that Jenny would review that, right? Angus, the 10 pound or the chief.
It depends, it
Okay.
depends. I mean, this is, we're really trying to get to, at least for everything above, the procurement threshold to where the chief procurement officer is involved sooner, but as recently as the past few days, where, Caitlin and I are spending some significant time on the purchase of a fire truck where she was presented with it. Or actually it was sent to the town accountant for signature, we sent it to Caitlin. We didn't know anything about it, it was being purchased through a collaborative, anyway, there's a whole backstory, but she didn't know anything about it, and it's a $800,000 purchase. So there's a lot of, and with the water, that's signed by the elected board of water commissioners and so there's not the kind of consistency that I think you're talking about.
Eventually, we're gonna get in trouble if we're not careful.
I think there's potential, yeah,
Yeah, and there's a lot of contracts.
there's a lot of contracts.
Float, and like, I remember the water one, and, like you said, that's up to them, so.
But it's still the town's, it's still the town's infrastructure, right?
They're on their own wavelength,
Yeah.
to be nice. We talked about could they use the ferry landing park, and I said, has anybody read the contract? And
Right.
the answer was like, not, it's like, that was right.
Yeah,
And so.
well, one of the challenges that I think, at least my office faces is, the bandwidth one, because it's not a contract, but take the River Road studies, the volume of information that's coming through is so huge.
I hadn't noticed.
And so it's kind of, and I don't wanna mislead anyone into, oh yeah, just, I've read it, I haven't read everything, cause I got, my own work to do, so. It's, there's definitely a number of times where my office is the pass through, I'm putting something in your packet. Should not be an indicator that I've read it.
My
It
intent
doesn't sound good, but it's a function of having kind of, a lot of responsibilities in a single office, with finance and HR management, and it's not just my office, the whole organization. There's just a bandwidth issue.
Yeah, but like the River Road thing, that's a document, that's. not a
Yeah, correct.
contract.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, so that's okay, we got the, memorandum for the bridge, we're looking at water issues, we're looking at, so many other things. And I'm gonna start asking everyone, has it been reviewed by
Yeah.
all, and,
Mhm.
maybe some will kick back and say legal should be looking at it, because you can get in trouble on some of these.
Mhm.
And a lot of big money involved.
Yeah,
And as we know, if we don't follow the obligation of the contract, 10 years down the road, we could be hamstringing some other poor town officials trying to untie some knot.
you are right. Yeah, no, it's a really fair point.
Maybe it's something.
So is this something we just add to the legal budget? I mean,
I was gonna say, at some point, I might be suggesting we add, and it doesn't have to be an in-depth, it's gotta be boilerplate is good and contract specific, needs to have cleaned up here or there.
mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to go full legal on it, or,
Well, I think we do, because who else is gonna review it? I mean,
certain department heads may be capable of reviewing their own.
you're talking
contracts.
about legal stuff, right?
Well, the contract coming up for the cable, all that stuff,
We're definitely working with town council. We had a call with him a couple of weeks ago and provided all the background documents, and that's definitely one we'll have legal
Yeah.
review before we sign it, and
so maybe going forward on large contracts in particular, add 3 or 5%. I was thinking of this on land acquisition, we have to have a line item in there, so we found out there's legal, there's.
Right,
Uh,
title stuff.
parking and all this other stuff, so I think we have to be.
3 or 5% to CPA.
Whatever the money is, if we need to spend $1 million, you've gotta have, 3 or 5,000 there for legal review.
mhm.
We could have saved on the Sawmill Brook thing, if we'd actually done the title search, we could have saved a lot of aggravation on that, if we'd had some money in there to do it at the time. So I'm just saying, we could better prepare and eliminate some log jams later on.
Yeah.
And it'll cost you a few dollars, but it's better to do it right the first time.
Yeah, no.
I think if we're gonna do that, it's better to contract it out and have a legal firm do it,
Right,
so
so
we have a consistent.
I'm suggesting.
But there's gonna need to be some subjective, as to what does and what doesn't, because for instance, like, right now, we've actually got KP reviewing our standard goods and services contract, just like to see, because we've been, basically what happened is, McCarron had a certain form of contract that he liked, and then when Wayne became procurement officer, he had a very different form of contract, and I know those of you who've seen the contracts, you can tell it's very different
Yeah,
than what McCarron used to use. Not to say it's better or worse, I don't know, I'm not the contract guy, but Wayne had his own thing, and then when Caitlin became procurement officer, she kind of worked with Wayne's template. And so I said to her, we haven't actually had KP review just the template like it, so I think having like a base contract that's got legal review, and then certain things aren't really gonna need it, because it's not a complicated contract. Others, like a water main or a telecom replacement, absolutely are complicated and unique, and there's hazards, so I think. But even within like a single, like a grant award, I'm signing, like the earmark, we got a $25,000 earmark, I have to sign a contract with the Commonwealth, it's a standard contract. But those sometimes have, pages and pages of conditions, or certainly the Mass Works with $1 million, like, there's so many contracts that, we really couldn't like, we would have to have, we would be running major legal bills to run everything through
But at
legal.
minimum, I'm thinking like the DPW, we spent, I think it was $180,000 to get a sidewalk snow blower.
Yeah,
And I come to find out a year later, we didn't get the model we had intended to buy because of cost or whatever.
mhm,
So that was a surprise.
mhm,
And if DPW is coming in and they want a dump truck, which is 380 or whatever it was we spent, that contract at a minimum should be reviewed by the head of each department to make sure they're getting what they represented and were promised by the vendor.
mhm,
To send it to accounting, just say, pay this, we don't know.
mhm.
You could be getting a half the product you thought you were getting. Right, I mean, they
Yeah, I mean, the sidewalk plow, it's not that they got other than they ordered other than what they thought they would get, because the prices had gone up, but they got what they ordered.
right, but I still wanna make sure that they're looking, cause then. They should be reviewing it before, when they get it, was it a purchase order they're using, whatever,
Yeah,
they should sign off on that, I hope they do.
we do not use a purchase order system, we're working on actually actively looking, Jenny would like to put one in place. And that's actually on my desk to approve, she sent me a request about a week ago to put in place a purchase order system. We haven't used one, one of my concerns is what's the threshold? Because we just have a very lean staff, like our finance staff, we're okay right now. But like if someone's out for a day, there's problems, we have no backup, we have no redundancy, and so. Purchase orders are extra amounts of paper for every single purchase, so if it's above $20,000 or something, that's okay, but if it got down to like too low a threshold, it's just gonna jam us up with.
No, but you mentioned $800,000 fire truck.
Yeah, that ought
I know.
to, yeah, right,
Whoever put that in front of us for funding in the first place, I'm sure as heck hoping has approved that the vehicle that is been ordered and coming in is exactly what they need. We had that list with
yes.
multiple, every add-on is $5,000 and $10,000. Did you get it?
So this one, interestingly, the reason we're reviewing it is to ensure compliance with 30B, because the two things that we've added to our contracts in the last couple of years, which amazingly had not been part of the standard contracts up until the last few years, is a certification from the town accountant that there are funds appropriated in the amount to pay the contract. That never used to be on contracts, it is now. So Jenny is signing every contract, just attesting that there's funds available. Caitlin is signing contracts above the procurement threshold, attesting that 30B was followed. So the case of the fire truck is, was presented, we were sent a contract. It didn't have those two signature blocks, and so I'm working with Caitlin, or she's working to make sure that there's like basically a consortium purchasing group that the town, it was represented as a member of. And we are, but neither my office nor her office had a single scrap of paper in any of our records showing we were a member. We were able to contact this purchasing group and get, there's a contract, but we're still looking for an executed contract as to when was it signed and by whom, because it was probably, might have been 10 years ago. And it's not something, they're not in our vendor list, they're not anyone in the front office has ever heard of. And so that's something that, we're trying to get an opinion from the Inspector General on whether this particular purchasing consortium is in fact compliant with 30B. I'm sure it is, but until we know, I told Caitlin, like, don't sign something certifying compliance until you know that it complies. And so these are the kinds of things where it happens more often than we like, that I'm presented with things, or others in the front office are presented with things, including an ambulance contract that I'm told has been being worked on for a year. I'm like, well, I didn't know it was being worked on for a year. Like, I just got it a week ago. So it's an issue. It's an issue of like trying to get towards some kind of centralized management of a town that's from 200 years operated in a really decentralized fashion. Every time I think we've gotten a handle on it, there's some new thing that's like, you gotta be kidding me, like. It's an issue, I mean.
But I would keep
I-
asking just to try and keep us on top of it.
Yeah, yeah,
It makes, I was assuming that it had gone through council and through your office or Jenny or somebody's
Yeah.
office.
yeah.
And we're sitting there voting and going, yeah, it's all good. Well, if nobody's read it and understood it, then we really should be looking at it a lot more, closely, I guess.
So where does that leave us on this?
I already said I'll vote for this one.
Okay, are you comfortable with that though, or?
But I still don't. No, I put in good faith that that's a kind of green belt that always been referenced.
So I guess I'm not disagreeing with you, but, say relevant to this particular. CR. I mean, I read it,
Did you understand it?
I think I did, yeah.
Okay.
I think everything made sense to me.
I mean,
but-
I understand it, but I don't know, I can't say that everything is in there that should be. in there.
Right, well, nor I.
Yeah.
And agreed there, but, I mean, there was, I did read it, there was nothing that jumped off the page to me.
Nothing's gonna bite the town. I understand that too.
Not that I interpreted at least.
But as you'll find out tomorrow, going through these union contracts, every word, every comma
Right,
has a different meaning to the union versus what it has to the town.
right, yeah.
So these contracts, and I used to review contracts where I work, you gotta want every single little thing. You could own something you never ever imagined you were gonna own. I can't review these contracts because it's not what I mean, I can read them. I wouldn't say I'm gonna review them. I just think we have to maybe focus a little more on, and if it's a live land purchase or something, I would in the future suggest we had a minor percentage for legal review.
All right.
And I think on major equipment purchases as well, I think that's great, because one of the reasons that. We don't refer more to legal is because of the budgetary impact. But if, for instance, that fire truck had carried, 3% above the purchase price for associated expenses. Then that would be fine to have, then I wouldn't have any concern about shipping it off to legal and have them look, but. Where I don't have, I have to look at trying to manage the overall townwide legal budget, so it becomes a matter of, do you want to spend, $600 or $800 or maybe $1,200 or more on one contract when we're, so it becomes more of a subjective thing. So I think that what you're getting at, I think of some thresholds, makes a lot of sense. One thing I've mentioned to different boards over the years I've been here, up in my last job up in Maine, in a lot of ways, I had like way more authority than I have in this job, but in one respect, I didn't. And that was contracts, is anything above $100,000 had to be voted by the council. And I used to make that point my first year when it was the board that hired me, and I was like, I remember telling them, like, it's always surprised me that West Newbury, where typically the board's like very hands-on, you'll see $600,000 contracts signed for solid waste hauling. Or for a fire truck purchase, that the board, I'm pretty proactive on sharing things with you. But before I was here, I don't know that the board that hired me, was even seeing those documents. And those are big dollars, so I think we've made progress, but I think having some more some more standards on what process, do we follow for different types of contracts?
Yeah, like a fire truck review is fairly simple compared to, water or the bridge or whatever, or even land acquisitions. That should be almost like a boilerplate thing, do you have the warranty, did you get the accessories you ordered? All those kind of, you almost can check off a lot of that on purchases. And that should become the responsibility of the requesting party too.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Motion.
I can see when they get answers from
Yeah.
home. I make a motion to accept the memorandum of agreement between the town of West Newbury and Essex County Greenbelt for the Evergreen property.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next item is review and approval. This should be a 2025, right?
Yes.
what are you schedule?
Oh, it should be, yeah.
Let's go back there.
No. Any questions on this?
I think that's, they didn't go over every single number. But I have no questions.
Okay. Chris?
Good.
Okay. Have a motion?
Yeah. We approve the FY 25 wage schedule as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next,
Now, that doesn't include the additional that I.
No, it doesn't, yeah,
Then addressed at some other point.
correct, yeah.
we did item H, item I, approval and sign of the paperwork for the bond anticipation.
Case in point right there.
Yeah. I mean, that made my head spin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Worst part is I have to sign it. I looked at it.
So now he's on the hook.
Yeah,
I'm gonna sign it, James Black.
Yeah, it is a lot of paper every year.
Yeah.
It's a lot of paper, and we don't even get it until, a lot of it we got Friday, so it's.
It wouldn't matter if I had it a month ago, I still don't
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
any questions on it, Frank?
I just said I understand it.
Well, I think we spend enough time on any particular paragraph.
Well, it's 4%, and then they get other fees and this and that and everything else.
And it's the spring and,
Yeah, who knows?
there's a lot there.
All right, do we have a motion then?
Yeah, let me go there to forward this motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the bond anticipation.
I think there's a form of motion in here,
Okay.
yeah, page 86, so, and I think you could, vote to approve the motion in the packet rather than, reading it, because it's quite lengthy.
Oh, there, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, I move that we, approve the motion as printed in the packet, on pages 86 and 87 of tonight's, agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So,
Next item is minutes.
notice you didn't want to make that motion.
Now I gotta sign that document next, I'll visit you. Trump will be in the same jail cell.
Your worst nightmare.
All right, page 23rd.
Yeah.
In terms of the people participating, I did not realize that Polly and, Paul Nyman were on with the CAC.
That's what I said on Zoom. I didn't get that either, but I don't know, because I wasn't focused on that, so.
Perhaps we just have James, Mass double check to make sure. I mean, there must be a reason he put that down there. I just didn't notice anybody else on Zoom.
Yeah, he watches the video when he's doing it, so I
Yeah.
assume he had a heads up on it. I didn't.
I mean, they didn't speak, but,
This was for.
May 23rd, yeah.
Because Judy was.
Judy
Yeah,
was
Judy was
here in
there.
person, so,
yeah,
yeah.
Polly and Paul were there.
Yeah, I mean, we had the content pulled up on the screen, so it's possible we just didn't notice they were
Yeah.
there, but he just confirmed that. On item town manager updates, item B, the second sentence, instead of evaluation, should be grant.
Sorry,
Item town manager B, item B. Second sentence, first word, just replace that with grant. Item F. I'm just not sure this is true. It says this would prevent the town from having to ask the voters for additional money in the future. Is that true, Angus?
The amount was set, was intended to.
To avoid instead of prevent?
Well, I think, I can tell you what. We had talked about bans versus bonds,
Yeah.
and if we get a long-term borrowing and we end up understating it. And the project ends up, because a change order is being $100 grand more, we're not gonna borrow $100 grand, so that would mean going back to the voters to appropriate funds that are already. Authorized for borrowing, so that was the kind of what was said. I think
Could we just say this would avoid?
issuance of bans would,
Avoid the potential
Having
of
asked for money?
yeah, I think that's,
taxpayers for
Yeah.
additional funds at a later date.
Anything on the second page? On the third page, I just wanted feedback. There's a long description of the pipeline discussion.
Paragraph.
I'm a little concerned about, having that much detail. I just want to come back to bite us. I mean, do you feel like it's okay having that?
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, is how much detail do you put in minutes, you know?
Yeah, well, just with this specifically because it's.
Well, but it is very long, and in general, some of these are longer than they need to be, I mean, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Like, how do you cut it down, I guess, if you want to?
yeah, it's almost harder to cut it down, you have to rewrite it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The one thing I would say is, let's see. It said when she showed the location and the pros and cons, I want to make it clear that that's Newburyport's pros and cons, not what we think are pros and cons. So let's see. 1, 2, 3.
that's it,
Oh, you see what I mean?
yeah. It's like, probably about 10 or 11 lines down, gave an idea of the pros and cons of each site. You got it. The first word is gave an idea. It's,
Oh, yeah.
And it was Jack's whole point was those aren't our pros and cons, but. Okay. I didn't have anything else in those minutes. Would you write?
No.
I don't like comments, I'm supposed to review these ahead of time, I don't remember seeing this set, I'm gonna have to go back and check, so I may be
Okay.
delinquent on that or something, I just feel like I hadn't reviewed that set, so.
do you want to table? So you guys are meeting a week
No.
now?
I wouldn't mind tabling these till,
Yeah.
even till tomorrow night. If we're going to be going, just, because quite honestly, I glanced at them and I didn't really.
It's just a week. We don't have a whole lot, knock on wood, we don't have a whole lot on this agenda at this point, so.
It's also only one.
Oh, that's the biggest mistake you ever made.
7 minutes.
Right.
You should have never said that.
What do you mean, 1 second?
Yeah.
That's 2 minutes.
With that?
Are you almost through with them? Maybe you're almost wrapped up, but.
I said 2 minutes.
Well, there are,
No,
Yeah.
this one's only one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's that what you mean?
Yeah, so why table? It's just voted.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Oh, unless you want to read it.
I wouldn't mind reading it.
Okay,
So I mean,
all right, and also June 4th.
yeah,
Okay. All right, so maybe we'll do tomorrow night. Or whenever, would you guys decide?
we can push it on into this.
All right, did we miss anything, Jen, in the agenda?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I've been keeping a check on it.
Just trying to quickly.
Yeah, and I think-
No, other than under general discussion items, but no, I've been keeping a checklist.
All right, so under F, general discussion, A is the federal awards policy. And that is one that you said that you have not reviewed.
I have not had time to review, so yeah, I was
So we should table that.
basically just making you aware that the town accountants recommended we do this. It is something that's gonna be required because of this so-called single audit you've heard us reference before, which is not something the town's ever had to do, but because of the ARPA funds and the amount of money, it's above a threshold that requires what's called a single audit. So one of the things that's recommended is to have it might actually be required to have a written policy along the lines of what's in your packet. So I know Jenny had put this together based on looking at 3 different samples and putting it together, and I'm sure it's very good. I just haven't had time to read it. So I wanted to put it on tonight for discussion, just to make you aware this is something we're working toward. But specifically not asking you to vote it, because before you're asked to vote it, I'd at least like to have the time to read it. And in fairness, Jenny gave it to me a month ago. I just haven't been able to
Mhm.
prioritize it above other things.
Okay. Next item is discussion of the meeting with the report. Would you like to give a recap on that, Angus?
Well, so, yeah, there's the, didn't we already give a recap of the meeting? I think that some of the new information for tonight is that obviously this IMA is before the council tonight, when they met earlier tonight, and this material that we found late last week was from the packet from the city's meeting tonight, specifically this memo, page 195 of the packet from the mayor to the council. I thought it was interesting, gives a little bit of insight into how it's being framed. I thought it was pretty positive.
Yeah, no, it was
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, we do know so you have the draft IMA in your packet. That's substantially similar to what you've seen previously. There's been a little bit of wordsmithing with their review, their legal review. But I think it's really in very good shape. So we know that the council meets on the 8th and the 22nd of July. And then I don't know the August meeting date unless either of you wrote it down. I don't think they gave us the date. They did say that the council only meets once in August. But I don't know the date, so I did ask Andrew that. I didn't get a response yet, but in general, I will say, I think, you know, the meeting on June 11th must be a contributor to this. I think there's been a noticeable increase in attention paid to this by the city over the last few weeks, which wasn't even evident the Friday before the meeting. When we, at that point, didn't even know who really was gonna be there. So I think that meeting, you know, hopefully ends up being an inflection point where things maybe start going in a better direction, but, you know, it's gonna come down to what amount they.
Yeah, so Chris, we did not recap this.
Oh, we didn't,
Yeah,
okay.
June 4th was our last meeting.
Oh, okay, all right.
I don't know if any questions,
Yeah,
but
well, I do, it was in the markups on the intermunicipal agreement by Andy Levine. And it was kind of a concerning comment, it says, it's page 183. There's a previously flagged, this is expected to be the biggest point of discussion, potential disagreement with the council, and that's a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
Well, so what does that mean? They want to pay us 60%? I mean, how else do they envision it? I mean, that's a pretty strange comment.
Yeah,
that was basically the position in the meeting.
What, that what are they intending to pay, what they?
Something other than 50% TBD. I mean, is that fair?
yeah. I mean, part of it is they've been, you know, consistent, going back several months, that the fact that the total project cost carries such a large contingency of.
Well, I agree, that was my next
So,
question.
yeah, so I think the idea has been, and continues to be, to put it out to bid, to get bid costs, to give everyone an actual number.
But so it's not the 50% that's bothering them, it's the dollars. If it was 50%
I
of a
think
million,
that's-
they wouldn't care.
No, it's the dollar, it's a.
Right. So if it comes down, if you got a 900,000 contingency, if that went to 200,000, the number becomes much more palatable.
More palatable, but there's been they've been conspicuously non-committal on any dollar amount whatsoever.
Yeah.
And, you know, we did make the point at the June 11th meeting that, you know, if the council is unwilling to agree to 50%, we continue to think that's eminently fair. But that there has to be an amount, they have to provide an amount. But we think that needs to be 50%, and that's our position, and that hasn't changed, but. We were trying to convey that them not voting anything is not an option. We
We
need
need
an
to know.
agreement because we need the legal rights to do work on the bridge, and we need to know what's the delta. So if they can't come to agreement at 50%. Walking away isn't an option. We'd rather have them vote an amount, even if we think it's an unfair or unsatisfactory amount.
Well, I understand their uneasiness, because the contingency is, if we had a hard number. Voting 50% might be an easier decision if it was. Not as overburdened as that, it's a strange contingency, particularly when it's been designed.
Right.
I mean, usually at 15%, so I don't know why there's that big a percentage added on contingency. So if that number reduced, which hopefully it would, because we saw on the, the water,
Right.
once you get closer to the real.
Well, the reason, the reason why there's such a big contingency is because this is actually the second update based on the same estimate by.
Yeah, but the numbers went way up on the estimate itself too.
Excuse me?
The number went way up on the base estimate too.
Yeah.
So to have the number go up and then the contingency is sort of double stacking stuff.
No, but this is the second time, even on the current estimate, this is the second time, isn't this the second time the contingency has been increased on the second estimate?
The earlier contingency was more of a. I think it was more of a placeholder type number. I think, conversations I've been part of with Micah going back a couple of years, because I think he's used to carry 10%.
Yeah.
He would consistently say,
Yeah.
he's like, for a project like this, he would recommend carrying a higher contingency. It wasn't until I think we started pressing them and probably, I don't know, last spring, a year ago, to say, we really need a good number. That was when, actually, I think it was even in December.
See,
I was meeting with John, Eric and Wayne in December, where I think he went to 25%.
Yes, 25%.
Yeah, exactly, no, the conversation you had with Wayne, I think.
Yeah, it was
So it had been at 10%.
Yeah.
And then it jumped up to 25%.
That's right, yeah.
And instead of going back through the numbers from scratch, he upped the contingency.
Yeah, but again, that all becomes irrelevant if you put it out to bid.
Right, absolutely.
That could change the dynamics quite a bit.
Yes.
But I do think there's some, other than the dollar amount, there's some philosophical objection to 50%, because it's not as important to them.
How philosophically valuable is it to be able to put water pipes under our streets?
Yeah, obviously. And Senator Tar actually said that, I mean, that was all of his meeting, and he put some pressure on him, which I think is why I was.
Again, 50% of 4 million is one thing.
Yeah.
50% of, 2.5 million is another thing.
But they have to sell it to the voters.
Yeah,
Because,
I thought it was interesting, it struck me that, the president of the city council seemed to really come around in that particular meeting, in terms of his perspective on it, and so I'm not sure advocacy is the right word, but his thinking that, this is an important thing to go forward.
Well, especially with the funding that's been secured. If
Right.
that goes away, then
Yeah.
it's a whole different game.
Right.
all right. Is that it? I will send correspondence, any questions on that? No,
No.
so do we need to go back to executive session to finish up those two items, Hanks?
I think having another day will not affect anything materially.
But these aren't on the,
No, I think we would want to repost, but rather than.
We continue our meeting tonight to tomorrow night?
I don't.
no, because we have to add these.
No, can have that,
But there is
meeting,
some-
open that one again, open tonight's meeting.
Jim's suggesting there could be an opportunity to recess till tomorrow.
That's what I'm saying.
I think as of right now,
Mhm.
I don't have kind of clear numbers. I can tell you more detail, but I don't have like clear numbers for, I have ranges, but
Okay.
you know, I did connect with the one person, which is concerning.
Mhm.
And then the other, yeah, so
All right, so,
I don't think I'd rather get it right in 24 hours than
oh, sure,
hastily.
yeah,
you
I
know,
just wanna know, so we're just.
No, it's a good question.
Or you say recess.
Actually, I don't think there's anything on recessing until tomorrow. You have a
Alright.
meeting directly tomorrow, executive session, we'll talk about it all night.
All right, so we
So,
have,
so
we need a motion.
what is the mechanism then? If we recess until tomorrow, recess this meeting until tomorrow, but then we're convening for a separate meeting tomorrow as well. How do you switch from
We do
one
this
meeting?
one and then adjourn.
Well, that's what I was, okay, so that is what you have to do, yeah.
There's really no problem with just reposting tomorrow's agenda to add the, negotiation with non-union personnel. That's the one matter.
Most just continued from previous meeting.
Yeah, I think that's
I think
cleaner
that's
for
less
minutes and things. Yeah, I think that's gonna be cleaner.
Make
Yeah.
a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Okay.
we're out of here.
That was a little convincing, huh?